most people, like you two, may share trail cam pictures back and forth to each other.
Sure.
You know, the trusted friend.
We got a joint account like a married couple.
Yeah. It's all transparent.
The Hunter Podcast is brought to you by Hoyt.
What can we say, man? Another year back with Hoyt. We're both shooting RX8s. I'm shooting 70 pounds in the bourbon, which I love bourbon.
It's great.
And you're shooting 80 pounds in the straight black.
Blacked out as always, man. I got the, so I'm shooting the 500 grain Easton Arrow this year. And at 80 pounds, I'm flinging that thing at like 300 feet per second. I mean, it's deadly. Put a water buffalo in front of me and he's done.
I mean, we shot it earlier. You literally put an arrow through a brand new target, like never been shot before.
I know. So one other thing that Hoyt is doing this year is they're making all their own strings in-house. And so the quality is top notch, and it just really is something that is setting them apart from their competitors.
Well, what we always try to do when we go to our bow shop, Ultimate Outdoors, is we try to shoot other bows just to make sure that we are really giving everybody a fair chance here. The reality is it's a no-brainer. Hoyt, it stands above all of them every single time.
Definitely. And so right now you can use code HUNTR, HUNTR, for 20% off any apparel on the Hoyt website. And as always,
get serious, get Hoyt. And we're back.
Hey-o.
HUNTR Podcast, episode 238, as Nick is heading to South Carolina.
Yeah, moving today, right?
Yep, moving today to South Carolina. Nick's still our executive producer. He just won't be joining us in studio, which is why I think, was the last podcast we talked about an intern coming in?
Yeah. And in fact, I'm going to talk to a guy.
We got a bunch of inquiries on it.
Yeah, I'll talk to a guy later today. And so, I mean, that's something we're kind of shopping out right now. It's not, I don't think an immediate need, but something we've been wanting to open up to people for some time is some sort of an internship program. I think it's fairly open-ended in our minds right now.
Sure.
You know, it's like it's probably part-time for the time being. It's mainly...
Yeah, at least for the off-season standpoint of things.
It's mainly, you know, we need help with file transfers, you know what I mean, just managing some of the... You know, there's some production of this too here, and looking at some, you know, getting into season, I think there's some film work maybe to do as well. So that's out there. If somebody's interested, you can reach out to us on Instagram DM or you know, the website form. Either of those is fine, and we'll sort it out.
You could be sitting there right now.
Yeah. There's an open seat there for the time being. So.
You could be sitting here. So anyways, we'll see about that. Do your part.
Hey, thank you guys for being here. Whether you're listening on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, those are 3 places that we drop these episodes. We do that every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And if you've reached out to us on, you know, the 2 platforms I just mentioned there, Instagram DM or the website, we appreciate you guys reaching out. I think we're pretty caught up to speed here. You know, some of those.
I think I'm caught up on Instagram.
We're touch and go.
There was a gap there that I may have missed, but I think I've recently been caught up the last couple of weeks.
All right, so blame Jeremy, not me, I guess.
Yeah, it's fine.
And we have some merch and stuff on the website. There's Nalgene's, we got some hats, some shirts, some stuff that Jeremy and I thought was cool, and we'll continue to probably work on some new stuff for that in the coming months here. So, you know, we get some time to refocus here after season, and so we appreciate you guys supporting us in that way. As does Nick. That's part of how he gets paid. And other than that, here we go.
Yeah, we're just kind of recharging the batteries here in the off season.
Recharging the batteries.
Yeah,
that's from a Rugrats episode.
Probably.
Did your dad say he's gonna recharge his batteries?
Oh yeah, I remember that episode. Yeah,
Classic.
Yeah. Then he thought all the parents were robots.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Very nice.
Did you see? Wait a minute. Did you see that as a kid, or was that your kids watching it? Because I saw that.
No, I saw that as a kid.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
You were probably like
at the tail end of the Rugrat era.
Yeah.
I remember that. Stands out to me very distinctly.
Maybe it was my sister because she's your age. So that's probably how. But yeah.
Right. Your babysitter.
Right. Yeah. Shut up, Rugrats are on. Anyways, it is February 13th.
Yeah, that's not like a Friday the 13th.
No, tomorrow's Valentine's Day, though.
February. Yep.
For all the guys that don't want to drop the ball. Well, but if you're listening to this, you dropped the ball. If you didn't remember.
I got Margie a heated blanket.
Good call.
That's what I got her. She's been asking for one for a while, and it's funny, like it seems like a thing to go out and do it, but it's like it takes me 15 seconds on Amazon. Like, beep, beep, beep.
That's what I saw this morning. It was like, I don't know. It's like JCPenney's is closing a bunch of shit. I was like, do people still shop like in a store like that?
Well, maybe not. Maybe that's why they're closing.
I don't think so. Just go online and There it is.
Mm-hmm.
Coming to the door in 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah, if you're listening to this, you already missed it. Hopefully you remembered and you're not in the doghouse at this point. And not a ton going on. Weather's been just real shitty. Back and forth, like snow, cold.
Rain.
We got, like I think for us, I know my farm in Kentucky is supposed to get like 3.5 to 4 inches of rain on Saturday and Sunday. That's like flood warnings everywhere. Like
I glanced last
gnarly.
night. I guess I just assumed it was going to be snow. Mine said like 1.5 inches, but maybe you're right. It could be just rain.
I think
at this point, I'd take rain. Truthfully, in the back of my mind, I'm like, the fact that my beans got eaten out there on the home farm, I'm just like, I'm done with I'll take rain. Anything that's going to keep them greening up or
give some sort of not having to dig through snow and ice.
I don't know how that happened, man. I really don't, because I'm looking at our Illinois farm, and I'm just blown away by like I really just don't think they've touched our beans.
I've seen them in there a little bit, but like never more than a couple, and not for an extended period of time like that clover.
Like they're just passing through, yeah, like the clover. That's what's crazy.
They're in there every day for like hours.
There's got to be like nothing left. It's like an eighth to a quarter acre clover plot. They are just hammers. 15 deer in there every single night.
Yeah, like even our standing corn, like you just don't see a lot of deer around them. Weird.
It's weird.
Yeah.
I think they just like I don't know. They never got hungry. Like they're focused on that woody browse, and I mean, you know, they don't. Maybe like the security cover, has something to do with it. But I don't know. I don't have an explanation.
I mean, we did get a little bit of snow there. Was that yesterday? Yesterday or 2 days ago?
Yeah,
I saw.
a little bit.
But I mean, it has not been much snow. I mean, it's been cold on certain times, but it has not been much so. So I mean, it's right there. Like they don't have to work through it. Unlike back home where we had a 4-week period there where they were digging through 7 to 8 inches of snow and ice to get the stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably where they really. But your beans were mowed down like in December.
Yeah. Was it end of December? I checked.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was earlier than I would have liked, for sure.
Yeah, so
surprisingly, and sorry,
weird. I don't know. That's been a real eye opener this year of just like how much they've hammered that. Like I could expect them to go through that as they transition to like a larger grain field,
which I think they are.
They're going to that field on the north,
cut cornfield to the north. But if that's the destination, like it's got to be purely like. I don't know, because it's not like there's food there when we have standing grain to the side. I mean, they're just picking through there, but I don't know. Maybe there's a piece of the puzzle that we don't see. A bigger field somewhere else, or
that farm is that farm will drive you a little bit bonkers just to understand like why they do what they do or where they go or these big turnovers we're seeing year to year.
Well, I mean, we can take something from that. Like I think that clover is we need more. We need more.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can recreate that on another end of the farm and stack some of that activity.
Yep.
So I think we take one of those, the smaller, the cove out.
Yep.
And just put that. In fact, I think in the next couple of weeks here, I think we frost seed that and just
keep working on it.
Let it roll.
Yeah, I don't know if we talked about it. It was a couple weeks ago, we had a stud 8-point show up on that farm that we had not seen ever.
Yeah.
Like I don't think ever. And we never saw him again. He was there for like one day passing through by, cut corn. I kind of thought maybe there was like a doe fawn and estrus in that area or something.
He was with some does.
Yeah. And so, or a doe just lapsed. But interesting to see. And then our neighbor was like, yeah, I've seen that deer before. So, and it's like, man, where's he been? Like, where's he been
I mean,
at?
I think he's just, because I'm pretty confident in our camera strategy. I think we've got it, pretty, not like we get every single picture, but
sure, we're covering ground.
Every single deer at some point, I mean, if they're there for enough time, I think that deer just spends more time on that neighbor
to
there.
The west.
And he just happened to loop down with some does. And not that we couldn't, have crack at him at some point. I mean, we're
that G2 was substantial.
Well, and we didn't get the side shots. I mean, he was thinking that G3 was like 16 inches, which
no way.
I don't think so. But also, neither of those pictures we got were, you could really, both of them were pretty head on. So if he's one of them deer, 8 points that the threes are angling at you real hard,
maybe
it could be longer than it look. If
that's
the case, he's all over 160, if not.
Oh, yeah, I'd say it's bigger. I mean, I remember Kev had a deer on his wall from sheds he found. I think the twos were 16 inches, and it was a giant.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Mega giant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a big deer.
Substantial deer.
Heavy. It was heavy too. Yeah, I mean he's probably whatever 6.5 at the basis.
It was big 8. So anyways, that's kind of where we're at. It's mid-February. If you're listening to this, it's whatever, a few days later. I don't know what that is. 16th, 17th, 18th, 18th, I think. It's the 18th or 19th today. And we're thinking about sheds. You picked up a bunch on the farm a week ago.
Yeah, have we talked since then on the podcast? Or?
I don't think so.
Really? Interesting. Yeah, time's flying. Well, I ran out to the farm there just kind of on a whim, and we're just running cameras, and saw I'm just seeing less and less horns. I'm like,
time to go.
Time to get out and run around. Or I guess a handful of the ones that I just was intentionally, wanting to get out and find. I could tell they were down for sure. So there was enough that I went and we picked up like 12 in 3 hours.
That's pretty good.
Well, yeah.
You found that the last year's side of GR8.
Mm-hmm.
You think you walked by that thing a bunch?
I mean, at least once.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. It's tough, man. Shed hunting's like challenging because it's like you're gonna miss some.
Oh yeah.
So it's like how much ground do you cover versus how thorough do you go back? How thorough do you go back over and cover it? Like, I mean that because I found his shed from. Oh, that's what you're saying. Yeah, I found GRH shed from last year, and I found the same side from this year.
Yeah,
and the one from last year was like plain sight, was just laying right there. I'm like,
yeah,
how do you miss that?
I don't know if I can bring this up as we're talking about sheds. We have a guest today, so we're gonna tie him in here quickly. But this was posted by, I want to say it was posted by the NDA, maybe National Deer Association. And it was a research project. Yep, here it is. So this was a research project from University of Nebraska at Kearney. I don't know. And basically, this student, I assume, found 113 matched sets of sheds, of whitetail sheds.
Wow.
And
in a year?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But what he looked at was the distance of the other antler. So when he found an antler, what was the distance to the other one?
Oh, cool.
So his results, and you can look at this on the NDA stuff, 56 of the match sets were within 10 meters of each other.
Wow.
So 30 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, there's one, there's the other one.
Mm-hmm.
So, 56, 30 feet. 27 of them were between 10 meters and 100 meters. So within 30 feet to 300 feet. 23 of them were 100 to 500 meters, and only 7 were 500 meters or more. So, I mean, the bottom line is it is very much like 2/3 of the match sets should be within 300 feet of the one that you find.
Interesting.
Pretty interesting to know. Going back to how much ground do you cover versus how thorough do you cover? If you find an antler, probably 66% chance that the other one's within 300 feet around you.
Yeah, spoiler alert, our guest is Mark Gloucester, and he's waiting patiently here.
Yeah.
I was watching his Whitetail Cribs episode this morning.
Mark is like, listen, that's bullshit.
And he was talking about this giant shed that I think it was his son went out and found, and like he said they gridded for like 3 hours and ended up finding the smash set. It was like 30 yards away from where they found the original, and just kept walking past it,
I think the one thing they said, I can't remember exactly what it was, is the furthest they found one was 1,251 yards away. So it's
a poke.
That's just
half mile.
That's 3/4 of a mile.
3/4.
Yep. So interesting, because I showed you that buck that I've got on public in Kentucky. He's been holding that other side for 2 weeks, but he's still covering the same ground. So that's the thing you have to think about is like, well, he's still moving with it, but he's using the same areas, the same patterns, which is why you probably have those high percentages of finding the same area. So, but yeah, it'd be cool. We'll see what Mark has to say here. But yeah, we've got Mark Gloucester on. You guys aren't familiar with Mark, probably have seen him from Whitetail Group. He's doing a lot of his consulting on his own. Mark will have to remind us. I wouldn't say it was the first time I came across Mark, but I vividly remember Mark in a tree stand videotaping a probably 160-inch buck, like kind of foggy morning. He'll know exactly which one I'm talking about. And I remember him passing it in Iowa, and I'm like, that dude's got balls. Like it was one of those deer that you're like, that's a giant. Wow, he just passed that deer.
And so we know Mark from he would have been Drury, right? Definitely some Drury.
Yeah.
And he can correct us here, but I want to say Whitetail Freaks.
I don't know, maybe.
More recently,
Whitetail Group,
some
with
stuff
Bobby.
with Higgins too, I believe, consulting.
Mm-hmm.
And
his own consulting.
A handful of other places,
yep.
his own stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. So been around. I've killed one.
Well, our most recent pseudo interaction was we went to look at one of Bobby Kendall's farms, and it was like, this is Mark Lester territory. We're like, oh.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know, Mark, but sounds cool. Yeah.
It sounds like this is important. This is important. So it'll be cool to kind of talk Mark. I mean, great timing for this. Aaron in mid-February talking about, I know he's on like a big consulting run here. He's seen a lot of properties, and we always love talking to those guys who've had on the ground experience, seeing a lot of properties across the U.S. in different habitats and different deer territories, and just being able to intake all of that data and be able to apply some sort of practicality back out of like, hey, I've seen how this works and how this, goes through. And Mark's done some really cool videos here on social recently, just talking about some of the design setups when he's on some of these client properties. And I think hearing that and trying to apply it to your own property is pretty awesome to be able to listen to. So let's bring Mark on.
How's it going? Real quick, you guys covered a mountain of information in a short period of time there.
Isn't that frustrating for you to be sitting there? I know you have so much to say, but
as far as background concerned, although I know Don and Candy pretty darn well, I was not with the Whitetail Freaks. When we left Drury Outdoors, myself and Eric Hale.
Yep.
Our brain trust was Legends of the Fall. So
that's right.
That's right.
Yep.
Mogart, Bonnie, and Mike.
Yeah, Bonnie and Mike. Mm-hmm.
And myself, and Eric and Chris.
Yeah.
Did that for 4 years, I guess. And my son it was one of those. I'll tell you, it was pretty emotional situation. We went through a whole season of hunting, and you're gone. And I worked in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd save up all of my time, and from end of October through basically December, we're gone to Northern Illinois, or some kind of a lease or something we got going on there, which Illinois Connection ended up being a sponsor of our show, so we was up there in Pike Adams County all the time with Doug Benefield. But then we would get Kansas tags and Iowa tags and whatever, and so we was just gone all the time. And my son was at that young impressionable age at 6, 7, 8, 9. And I got home, and I was only home a couple of weeks maybe, and I was sitting in the living room floor booking flights and stuff, because we have to go to the SHOT Show and ATA show and all of that stuff, because that's where we have all of our sponsor business meetings and stuff. And my son came up and sat on my lap, and he's like, and he started crying. He's like, "You're leaving again?" And he's like, almost. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. He looked at me and he's crying. He's like, "It's almost like you love hunting more than you love me."
Oh no!
And I looked at my wife and said, "I'm done."
Yeah.
I'm done. This is a done deal. It's a done deal. So for several years, I kind of sold out of the company and started just taking him hunting with me and spending more time at home during the season, which was a blessing. I mean, and the little sucker did really well. I think he killed 5 Boone and Crockett deer, 1 200-incher. I mean, like he
yeah, pretty good.
he had a pretty successful young career.
Yeah.
So all of that being said, and I'll tell you right now, I would trade every single deer I ever killed to watch him kill them. It's been a blessing in that side of things.
That's tough, man. I mean, I think that it's kind of changed now, but like back then, I think a lot of people looked at it and were like, man, I wish I could hunt for a living, right? And without understanding the travel demands, the family sacrifices that have there, and then really from the business side, man, the sponsor game in this industry is and was brutal. Like it's been just cutthroat.
You are so right. And here's the thing, there's only so many marketing dollars.
Yeah.
Right. And then and there's that 5% that takes up 90% of the marketing dollars. I mean, your Lee and Tiffany's are monsters. Your Mark and Terry Juries are monsters. The Kiskis and and then the Lindsays and so on and so forth. They take up so much of that marketing. There's not much left.
Not much.
It creates a bit of a frenzy, to get marketing dollars, to support your show. And people don't understand how that works. You have to, you're more or less footing that money. Like, like we have our show is on the Outdoor Channel, and Jeff Wayne at the time, and he might still be, was like the CEO of the Outdoor Channel. And for you to get a show on there, you have to produce this like 6-minute sizzle reel of all of the characters and all of that stuff, of all of who's going to be on that show. And then the way it's edited and kind of your graphics package, and kind of have all of that in there. And then they take it to a panel, look at it, and decide whether they are okay with you giving them your $200,000 for that 6 months, to air your show on their channel,
Wow.
And then so you front that money, and then editing, I mean, most people are not that, can't edit, because you can have the best content in the world, but if it's not edited good and put together, smoothly, your show is not that good,
Yeah. Yeah.
That being said, it's expensive, I mean, next thing you blink your eyes and you're $400,000 into something that you're trying to get, some kind of sponsorship to recoup all of that money. And then like our show, we were splitting it 6 ways.
Yeah.
Well, even if you ended up $120,000 to the good side at the end of the year, you made $20,000 after you chop that 6 ways. And then, there's Uncle Sam and everything else involved very few people on any of them shows are actually making any real money.
No, like you said, it's the 5%, if anything.
Yeah. I mean, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm a capitalist, and I'm all about them, doing well.
Yep.
And Lee is a pretty good friend of mine. Mark and Terry still are, I mean, Don and Candy and all of that, and God bless them. They've provided myself as well as I'm certain you hours of TV entertainment. So, I mean,
absolutely.
I'm on board. I'm still a fan, but
Mark,
it's just hard to, and I don't want to call it compete, but it's hard to play in that arena, and make any real money. And then when you make your passion your job, it's like a DNR agent, let's say. Maybe they love the outdoors, they love to hunt and all that stuff, and they're like, man, I want to be a DNR agent because that's something I want to do, that I'm, whatever. Well, the next thing you know, you go through college, do all that, and then you're working in that arena, and all of a sudden you blink your eyes and you figure that, oh, guess what? I really don't get to hunt anymore.
Yeah, you don't have time.
My busy time, and I could see where it would turn people away from that kind of stuff. Whenever you make your passion your job, in some arenas, it's not worth it at all. Now, I will say on the consulting side of things, I absolutely love. I exchanged a prison setting where every single person you deal with are rapists, pedophiles, murderers, attempted murderers. That's essentially what was in my prison, for going to different farms and getting to see all of this stuff that these have set up and all of that. And I mean, I'll talk deer to an oak tree if it'll listen. I just love it. So in what I do now, I love it.
Yeah.
So,
Mark, forgive me for not knowing. I don't have the outdoor. I haven't had like cable TV for some time. Do you guys still have a show on the Outdoor Channel?
Everybody's sold out of that company, but Mike and Bonnie McFerrin, and Mike and Bonnie McFerrin, to my knowledge, is still running that show.
And this was the Legends of the Fall show.
I think they are. I've seen the kid. They use the kids a lot. I mean, obviously, kids are grown up at this point, but like it's very family oriented. they've still, I think they've got a pretty big ranch in Texas that they do a lot of their hunting and stuff on.
If they're still where they was leasing 13,000 acres of the King Ranch.
Yep, that's a good spot.
Yeah. Well, it's weird for Jeremy and I, like, and obviously no disrespect, we have tons of friends that are on the Outdoor and Sportsman channel, like all the whatever you would call that, network television, and I'm like, it just seems like it's just such a weird thing that's happening where like we know that they're doing that, and we see like marketing dollars, like in some of our partners even that we talk to and stuff, and we see dollars being exchanged there. And I mean, as people who are highly invested in outdoor industry, we're consumers ourselves, you know what I mean? And so we feel like, okay, we're a consumer, like, we have some concept of what like would make sense from what's going to be effective from a marketing standpoint. And I'm like, what's happening here? I'm like, how is that they're just doing the thing still? Like I see like, oh, okay, we'll see them come in like we'll see some $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 proposals from like Outdoor Channel shows. And I'm like, how in the world do they think that that's worth it? How can they even ask that? And it blows my mind. Some of those guys have, they do have the influence, right? And they're, that they've done a good job, I think, of transitioning into, more of a digital format. And stuff. You mentioned Lacoste. I think those guys do a fantastic job with a lot of respect for those guys, but there's everybody underneath that I'm just like, how is that justified? It blows my mind to this day.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And in my opinion, I mean, the juries, to your point, they, in my opinion, have weathered the storm. And I call it storm, probably the best. They got Taylor. Yeah. And what I mean by that is so it's generational there. And she's old enough to understand it, but young enough that she's for lack of a better term, hip. She's understands the younger genre, the younger generation. Sure. And and in my opinion, she's taken the juries, all the way into the next generation as well, because of their, her understanding and influence. So it's just kind of getting passed down generational and staying current and what people want to see. And and again, in my opinion, that's probably through her mind, and to Mark and Terry's credit, they understand it. They understand that change.
They tackled it head on for sure. You know what I mean? Maybe it was clunky in the beginning there because they're
well, look how many shows
they're older, but they definitely were like, let's go for it. We need to tackle this digital space.
They embraced it.
Yeah,
where a lot of people were resistant to the point where they couldn't be resistant anymore, and then they were behind the ball, right? That trying to catch up was nearly impossible.
Well, and that's where, because we as consumers went that way. You know what I mean? You and I will scroll on Instagram or we're on YouTube. Like I said, we don't have the Outdoor Channel. So when you hear about these contracts getting paid out, 50, 100, 50, whatever, thousands of dollars, and I'm like, I didn't even know they still had a show.
Yeah.
That's where I'm like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas 10 or 15 years ago, like, the TV aspect of things, like it was, I mean, the Outdoor Channel, sports, it was huge.
Oh, yeah.
Giant.
Well, that was it.
I mean, it was the heyday of it. I mean, yeah. And if you were in there, to Mark's point, I mean, we were one of the few industries where you were auditioning and then paying the network to be on TV, right? Like most things are buying your show, right? And then they make their money up. You were basically paying for time slots to be able to then go out and sell those spots and make money. And so, yeah, it's a completely different way of thinking and super risky at that point. Because if you, like Mark said, like you're $400,000 into this thing and it's like, well, what if I don't go get those sponsors?
Yeah, no, you're paying up. You're out.
You're out.
It's a scary deal, I mean, because most people just can't stroke a $400,000 check and just be like, okay, well, if I lose it, I guess I lose it. No big deal.
I still don't think, Mark, like, and obviously I'm not seeing like a P&L from these guys, but like, I do think that like whether money came from an outside business that they started, or maybe they made enough at one time to be able to make some smart investments and stuff. I think that most people that you see doing really, really, perceivingly well, like in the hunting space, making a show and stuff like that. It's like the point is basically not to make money. Right. It's all a write-off. That's the point of having like a business that correlates with your passion.
Sure. And I don't know about some of them, but and again, it's just their intelligence, like Mark and Terry, Terry's boy was one of the editors, one of the main editors. They hire in-house editors. And again, they're, in my opinion, Mark is a marketing genius.
Yeah. Agreed.
But that being said, they're in-house. So all of a sudden they're not paying this outside entity to do your editing. It's in-house stuff. So all of it gets edited in-house. To Pat Nicole. Pat's credit. Pat is, early on in his career, that's kind of
that was his gig.
He was a filmer and an editor and whatever. And then he's taken that part and then turned it into everything else. So he does his own marketing for his own stuff. So we don't have a marketing firm trying to gain marketing dollars, or at least this is the way it was when I was in it. I don't know if anything's changed since then or whatever, but so they did their own editing. They did their own, and it was Pat Nicole basically only. So not paying out a bunch of subcontractors and so on and so forth, and in that situation, kind of the only dollars that he had really going out, that were just out, is to the channel itself.
Right.
And then, everything else, all the marketing, all the editing, all that stuff was in home. So, and then it's just those two. So they could bring in far less dollars. I'm not saying they were at all. They very successful, but they could bring in far less dollars and their bottom line would be much higher than say us, where we weren't doing our own editing. We weren't doing our own marketing. Right. All of that stuff was outsourced and it all costs money. Now, certainly, we, a lot of our Nielsen rating stuff, because that's essentially, how many people are watching you and where are you ranked along there, because that matters to the marketing dollars, that's coming in, because somebody that's got marketing dollars to put out there, they're like, okay, well, where do I best, get the best bang for my buck? Well, if, 500,000 people are watching this show per week versus 150,000, well, I want to slide my dollars into more eyes. So it goes into that genre. So and we were most of the time a top 5 rated, Nielsen rated, show on the Outdoor Channel or whatever which was awesome, because that laid the base, I guess you could say, for the consulting thing. When I went that way, I had no idea kind of the power of television and the media and so on and so forth. And then that deer right there off my shoulder there, that buck Zeus I shot 2020, 209 and some change gross.
3/8, I believe.
Typical, I think it was. but that deer, it had me on Bowhunter Magazine, and North American Whitetail wanted me to do an article for it. So I wrote an article in North American Whitetail. And all of that was playing out in 21, which was the year I started doing the consulting stuff. So, they just put my face and my name in front of a bunch of eyes at that time, I guess. Super fortunate, super blessed on that side of things, because I just had no idea the power of that, because then, my phone really started ringing, off the hook whenever I kind of dipped my toe in that consulting side of things.
Yeah.
And then going from there, I guess and I'm not trying to change the subject here, but my consults, the way I look at things is a lot different, and I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody, but there's a lot of consultants out there. Like if you call them, if you guys are wanting to consult, that you call a number or whatever, and then somebody talks to you, maybe that person, and then you get, you set up a date, and then somebody you didn't talk to at all shows up.
Right.
And you're not getting that person or that mind that you think that you should be getting. Sure. And I've done a bunch of reconsults of other consultants that's been there, and then the client was extremely upset with the way things went.
Yep.
If you will, because they didn't get the person that they was expecting to get, and then it was rushed, and it was, I don't know. I'm not trying to put shade there on somebody, but I just, if somebody calls me, I talk to them personally on the phone. I think a lot gets lost in translation when it's just text.
Sure.
or messenger or whatever. So if somebody calls me or texts me or whatever, I'm like, hey, you got time to jump on the phone and, let's talk, because I try to tell everybody, listen, I'm not saying I'm the best consultant. I'm not saying I'm the whatever, but vet the people, because a lot of my consults are people that had a previous consultant there and just simply wasn't happy with what they got. And I'm like, hey, if you're trying to kill a 5+ year-old deer, that and your own personal goal is 170 and up every year or whatever. So let's just say I want to kill a 5.5-year-old at 170 plus. You're thinning down the number of deer that you're willing to take on your farm, every year. And some years, you might not even have that. And my point with all of that is vet the people that are coming to help you out, because if the person that is coming to help you out isn't consistently killing the type of animal at which you're trying to kill, what in the world makes you think that person's qualified to teach you how to do this?
Right. Yep.
And I know, and I'm not trying to sound elitist or whatever. I'm not putting that out there. It's just that and as to a point one of you talked about earlier or whatever about the deer on your farms and bouncing around and trying to get on particular year of age or whatever. Through most of my career, I didn't own a bunch of ground or whatever. It was permission or lease or family ground or whatever. Well, I can tell you this right now: you go get permission on a farm, and then you go shoot a 200-incher off of it. I'll show you a farm you won't have the next year permission.
Oh, guarantee.
Right.
Yep.
It's repeated itself so many times on my end of things. It's crazy, because people are like, oh, Mark killed a whatever size deer on that. Next thing you know, they've got a grandson or a nephew or a cousin or somebody that comes in and leases that thing up. I mean, so many times you get on a farm. If I get on a farm that is permission or lease and I kill the big deer on that farm, I just expect for the fact I'm not going to have that farm.
Right.
we just
the way it is.
We just talked to Greg Glessinger last week, and that was like, he was sharing his story of what motivated him to buy his first farm. And he's like, I had this lease. It was, it was a good lease. And he's like, I had it for, several years. I put all the sweat equity into it. And he's like, I was tipping over some big deer and, nobody in the family hunted, but then, the nephew comes along or whatever. And next thing you know, he's out. And it's like, he's just one of many, like you said.
And I hated it early on. I mean, nobody likes it. But the curse also was my education, and bear with me when I talk about this, because I think it, and what I mean by education, it made me a better hunter, and it made me more qualified, I guess, to help somebody on their farm, because constantly every year I was on a new farm. I had to be able to look at that farm, try to determine how a mature buck is going to use that farm, and then get on and hunt and harvest that deer. Because the moment I harvested it, I was off, and I had to find another farm to hunt. You know, so it kind of gave me that education of being able to look at things and figure it out quick, knowing, guess what, you're done. You know, as soon as you kill this deer that you're after, you're most likely don't have it anymore.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have a tough time, accepting that that's how it is. But I mean, it is the reality of it right now. And that,
that's the curse of publicizing it too. Yeah. Like if you're not on TV, then just as long as nobody knows, you'll have to lease again.
I mean, if you're paying $20 an acre, for a piece of ground and you kill a giant on it, somebody will come in and offer 30 without even stepping foot on it. Like that's just, that's where we are in this hunting, time frame.
I watched that play out several years ago. Do you remember when Stan Potts shot that 220?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was about 15 miles from my house, and I hunted, about 5 miles from there, roughly. And, through a friend of a friend, that particular farm was a fairly large farm. I think it was 880 acres, 800 some acres. That being said, Stan was on it, and Stan's a killer. I mean, at the end of the day,
did he shoot that one is that at the power plant?
And
no.
the deal with that is that guy that he leased that ground off of also did like field trials with bird dogs and stuff.
Yep.
And so there was these group of guys that was from Georgia that was there whenever doing their bird dog stuff. When Stan rolls a 220 out of the woods, and then the next year he shot. I don't know if you remember the video or how much you've watched this Stan, but he shot like 160s class 8-point over a decoy, like 5 yards decoyed it in on the same farm. They were there that day when he hauled that out. Next thing you know, they dropped the guy a check and leased the farm out from under Stan to the point of where he couldn't, financially, make. And then they never killed anything. It just goes to show you, it doesn't matter what farm you're on. Yeah, if you don't have it right here,
you don't know what you're doing. You're not capitalizing.
You're not capitalizing, and they to my knowledge, when they leased it, they had a couple years there and they never shot anything of significance at all. If you think about it, everybody's always changing their bows and getting a new bow and all that stuff. I use a 2013 Elite Energy 35. It's my favorite bow. It's the most forgiving bow that I've ever shot for my shooting style, whatever. All these people are buying new $1,500, $2,000 bows with the best equipment in the world. If you think about it, Fred Bear killed a lot of big shit whenever with a stick and string, it's the person, not the equipment.
Yeah, I think when you get into those kind of thought processes around that, and it probably is because of social media and what people see on YouTube and things like that. But, obviously you got to the deer have to be there, right? Can't kill them if they aren't there type of thing. Sure. But, to your point, I do think that I won't say that it gets too much acknowledgement, because, it does take money a lot of times to lease and or buy some of these properties to get on them. But that money isn't necessarily always going to lead those people to killing deer. Case in point, like these guys at least that out from understand is like, cool, they had the money, they leased it, they should be in an area where those deer are, didn't kill them, right? Because they didn't know how, they didn't know what they were doing. And so I think that people, it's a hard thing to try to process through, where there's this fine line of like, okay, well, these guys have all the best property and like I only have access to this. They're going to kill all the big deer and I'm not. Maybe you struggle a little bit in what you have right now, but that doesn't mean that all of these guys that have the best properties are going to be able to just kill every big deer that's around.
For sure. I mean, and a lot of them don't. They might still kill big deer, but if you're in charge of 800, 900,000 acres in prime hunting area of the world, you've got several big deer on the farm. I mean, you're a much more fruitful blind squirrel, even if you don't know how to hunt, when you have that kind of property. For sure. Versus somebody on a permission 40.
Yeah.
I mean, for sure. Without question. But and I've always went to and when you guys was alluding to this earlier too about effort and time and time spent. This don't just fall in on you. I always say all the time that right now is when I kill the deer I'm after. And my point with that is right now is when I'm doing all my work. I'm doing my work. I'm learning. I'm, getting, all of the information and intel that I can to try to do this and get your stand set up or at least get your stand picked out, or whatever. And get all of the work done, the foundation, think about it, the tallest skyscraper in the world is only as good as the foundation it's sitting on.
Yeah.
So you lay that foundation work out now. That hunting season is the fun part. The work is now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I mean, we always kind of say like at this time of the year, it's like, okay, you just wrapped up something, but to your point, I think it is one of the best. And it's one of my favorite times to be in the woods, right? It's bare bones. I can be more aggressive than I have been the rest of the year in terms of going in and looking for things and reading sign and looking for sheds and understanding like, hey, was that a ledge? Like, do you think he was bedded there? How thick is this? I think all of those pieces of it now, through March is an amazing time to be out in the woods and do that stuff. I think that people probably lean a little bit too much on, well, we've talked about it a lot. I mean, people lean way too much on cameras now, right? I mean, the fact that like there are probably a large group of people, and not anything wrong with it, but that are not paying attention to anything in the woods from now until July or August, right? And then it's like, okay, my cameras are out. I see them. Now I'm thinking about how to kill this deer, right? To your point, it's like all of the stuff that you could learn here in the next 60 to 75 days is extremely critical. Sure, it's great to get pictures of him, later on. Hey, he's alive. He's here. He's doing things. There's a pattern. But understanding then the foundation of why is he coming from A to B? What was he doing there? That's what you can find right now.
You're on a very critical topic that I talk about all the time in my consult. Most people like the trail cam pictures. Don't get me wrong, they're invaluable information without question, as long as you're getting them. But I wouldn't necessarily just not hunt something to that. The fact that you haven't got a picture of a particular deer that is there, but it can lean you on which direction you're going to hunt things and so on and so forth. But most people, like let's say you two are on the same farms or whatever, and you're hunting, and you might get a picture of your target deer. Let's say the 8-pointer you guys are talking about earlier. Say shows up, you've brought him in and recruited him, because I see that happen a lot when you guys got all the standing food. If your neighbors don't, you might recruit him late season, and it usually speaking, if he's there spring green up, you just recruited that deer.
Yeah,
interesting.
They tend to not go home. Lee Lakowski talks about this all the time. Like, listen, if I get on a new farm, I'll pile the nutrients to him, and if I can keep him till spring green up, a lot of the time, I just recruited that deer. He's made his home here.
Wow.
So forth. But on top of that, trail cam pictures. I talk about this in my seminars. I talk about it in consults and all that. Most people, like you two, may share trail cam pictures back and forth to each other.
Sure.
The trusted friends.
We got a joint account like a married couple.
Yeah. It's all transparent.
But my point is, you're like, oh, the 168 is on the West Food Plot today, or whatever be the case. And most of the time, that's where the trail cam data ends, I guess. And I say nobody, a lot of people don't delve past that.
Yeah.
But if I create files for every deer of interest, even if they're not necessarily the size I'm after. Right now, they look like they're showing promise. And I think in 2 or 3 years, if they're going to be, I start creating data to those. So, but I want to make certain that your time and your date and all of that is correct on your cameras, and your location and the direction at which it's aimed. Because when you start getting pictures on different food plots, different areas of your farm of that deer, I just throw them all in a file. Now, Tacticam and some of the other cameras, Blackgate and several others now are starting to put weather data on there too.
Yep.
And I'm not saying I'm the person that started that whole scenario, but I've done some consults with some influential people in the camera world. I'll put it like this, and as well as a seminar in front of some of the other guys before they were doing any of this. And I started talking about how I create a file for my deer. Like in most people's phones, there might be, summer 2023, family, deer, whatever. Me, I name the deer, and then it doesn't matter. Name them whatever. We got farms, I named them all Greek gods, like that one, Zeus, right?
Yep.
And Hades is back over there. I killed 2 of those, off that farm or whatever. Might be the case. All I'm getting at is that create a file for the deer, and then so put all of your known pictures and known locations in that. If it is a camera that doesn't give you that data, then pull up Weather Underground, type in your zip code, and then go to that exact time. So if that picture is November 3rd at 4:32 p.m., go to Weather Underground, that zip code, click on history, and
historical weather,
the exact wind direction, barometric pressure, and the speed, all of that, and then type it on. Most every phone has a photo editor app. You can type all of that data right on that picture, and then stick it back in your file. once you've got 80, 90, 100 data points of known areas and then start breaking it down, you find out real fast how a particular deer wants to use your farm. You might find out real fast that, you might have 8 pictures of him on your farm, and you find out that every time he comes in off your farm, because you thought he was kind of living on your neighbors, that on a northwest wind, maybe that neighbor's to the southeast or south of you, and he's rolling through quartered into the wind, daylighting on your farm on northwest winds only. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, you have this aha moment that this deer tends to only daylight. He is in fact coming from the neighbors, and he's in fact quartering into the wind every time he daylights. How am I going to use that information to key in on that deer? Because, and this goes into the next part of this. So many people I see when they hunt, they only think about themselves. And it's what I call Pandora's box to big buck killing. When you get 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, and even sometimes 4-year-old deer tend to not be so critical about that wind, especially daylight hours. But if you think about it, most people, they set up their stands. If I said play the wind, they're like, well, no kidding, dummy. I've heard that 42,000 times over. But in their head, they're playing the wind to themselves. They're only thinking about themselves, the way they set up their stand and the way they hunt. And they ask, and you think about this, they're asking a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old deer that the good Lord gave him something that is almost above any other thing walking this earth. Like a bloodhound. 220 million scent receptors in his nose. That whitetail, north of 300. He smells 25% better than a bloodhound. Now, you won't beat that nose. I mean, you just won't do it. Now, and to my point, have you ever rattled at a buck? Especially a mature one? Even if you blind rattled and you've seen him, or if you had a positive response to rattling, what's he going to do?
He's going to win.
If he can stay in cover, he circles down the window. Now, do you think that is an anomaly, just something he does whenever he hears 2 antlers hitting together? Or do you think you're getting a glimpse into his world of how he thinks every day of his life? Because I can assure you, if you smash 2 antlers together and you've seen a response, you've duped him. He thinks you're a deer, because I assure you, he's not closing distance to what he thinks is a human.
Right.
I mean, he thinks you're deer, and yet he's still going to circle downwind of you. If he can stay in cover and do it, that's what he's going to do. So my point with that is, a mature buck, if your setup is set up in a fashion that you go hunt it and you are expecting him to stand up during daylight hours and walk out with the wind hitting him in the back of the head, you might as well have got a 12-pack of your favorite deer or beer and started watching a college football game, because you're going to see the same number of big bucks that night. You're asking him to do something he'll never do. The analogy I always use is, you might catch me at the ballet. I hate the ballet. I have no interest. My pretty little wife would have took me there kicking and screaming. I have no interest in ever going to the ballet. You could probably pattern me at that golf course that's right up the hill here, because I love to golf and I get progressively worse when I drink. But I mean, it's fun. So I mean, I go there. I mean, you could pattern me at the ballet. My point is you could possibly kill that deer, in a transition, whatever, where the wind ain't maybe necessarily right for him, but you'll never pattern that. You won't consistently ever do that. That deer wants the wind. He wants to cover upwind of him, and he wants to quarter into the wind. And if our first thought tomorrow is, you look at the wind, you say the wind's southwest, and you're like, how is that deer that I'm after going to use my farm today with the southwest wind? And then you hunt according to how you think he is going to want to use your farm. You're 10 times the hunter tomorrow as you was today.
Yeah.
No doubt. HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Deer Grow.
Man, we've been using Deer Grow products for a long time. The Plot Start and Plot Boost, more recently Plot Till. Now we've got 3 new liquid fertilizers that have been put in the mix that will cover everything we could want for a food plot program.
It's huge, man. The more food plotting we do, it's like, man, the liquids just make sense. Like whether it's herbicides or the Plot Start and Plot Boost, and now the fertilizers getting mixed in. It's like, man, I can combine all of those in certain cases and do less passes for more results.
I mean, it's all about efficiency. I mean, like you said, less passes. If you're out there treating your beans with glyphosate in the summertime, you can mix in this fertilizer, do that all at once. You have the boost in there to help some metabolism. It's all about efficiency when we're talking about food plots. And really the big difference on these liquid fertilizers is you're bypassing some of these soil limitations, pH limitations, the soil type. In a lot of cases, we talk about dry fertilizers only being available for 17% of what you put down in the first year. These liquid fertilizers straight into the plant are 90% available in the first year. Huge difference in what you're going to see in growth.
It's huge. And so right now you can use code HUNTR15 for 15% off any of the Deer Grow products on their website. And as always,
better food plots, bigger deer.
It's really interesting to like, because guys will probably fight that for a period of time, you know, just because it's hard. It's hard to conceive like how, like there's a whole new, okay, so now it's not just my wind. Like if all I had to think about before was like I can pull up my mapping app, I can see my weather cone is going this way. I'm like, all right, cool, I'm good. To now apply to like what situations can I have that, but also the wind is in his favor. It's like it takes the number of like stand locations and whittles it down to like, 10 or 25% of potential like of setups. You're like, sure. Okay, initially I thought there was a lot of places where I could, hunt effectively here, but if I'm hunting a mature buck that's going to be using the wind to his favor, I'm like, there's, a small number of those are going to actually, probably pan out.
For sure.
But they're beautiful. Sure. They're beautiful when you find them. You're like, it's like a holy grail. Like, ah.
So that's where we go into on the consulting side of the manipulation. I typically try to pick my stands with my ingress and egress first. Because if you blow up the deer you're after going in,
sure.
Or if you're sitting in the back of your food plot and you have to blow up that field, if the deer that you're after doesn't show up that day, and then there's 30 deer on that field, how do you get out of that?
Right. Yeah.
If you got to blow up that field, it isn't worth a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out. It's not worth anything, because the epitome of hunting pressure is you go hunt that, blow those deer up when you leave. Well, the deer you was after could have been 100 yards inside that timber, bedded right there,
sure.
Or browsing around right in his bedding, waiting, and you just blew 30 deer right past him.
Right.
He's still got the education,
mm-hmm.
whether it's there or not, So my point with that is, and the first time you hunt it, there might be 30, and the second time there might be 15, and the third time 8, and the fourth time it's a doe and twins, and she walks out looking up into that tree or that barn every time she walks out there, because every deer on that farm has learned that a human sits in that tree right there or that blind.
Yeah.
It's hunting pressure. It's the epitome of hunting pressure. If you think about it,
it happens that fast too, Mark. Like you said, for like 4 sits. It's just like, it's done. It's done for as long as it takes for them to reset.
Yep. They're patterning you as much as you're patterning them.
Yeah.
And the key is the juggling match, if you will, is to design your farm to hunt it like a ghost. The analogy I always use is like today, if you go home, you might, it's winter, but on a normal day, you might, mow the yard, clean up the yard, pick up sticks, whatever, go inside, take a shower, have dinner with the wife or whatever, and watch a movie, and just kind of comfortable in and about your area of the world,
mm-hmm.
Calm, cool, and collected. But what if somebody shot a rifle shot through your picture window?
Mm-hmm.
You're probably going to get in a fortified position, grab your family, maybe arm yourself. All of a sudden, you're a much tougher person to harm than before you knew somebody was there to harm you.
Yeah.
The point with that in the deer world is, and you don't think we're fortunate enough to live in a country, we don't think somebody's out to harm us all the time.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
But that deer, if you're in an area that there's mountain lions will hunt him at night. Coyotes will hunt him at night. Bobcats will hunt him at night. Other deer his age will hunt around at night. My point with that is he's so in tune to his area because he thinks everything's there to kill him. He's
survive.
He's really locked in, and you're not going to go set in his living room and him not know you're there. He'll, even if he wasn't there for 2 days, when he comes in, he cuts where you've crossed 4 trails, and all of a sudden, he starts putting the portfolio together on you, So the moment we can remove ourselves from hunting pressure, perceived hunting pressure on the farm, my analogy there is I want to be able to hunt the core of the farm without ever having to punch into the core of the farm. So if I can do things to manipulate it and whatever, where I can get in and just kind of peek through the curtain for 3 or 4 or 5 hours, close the curtain and get out the backside.
Yep.
And we'll never be 100%, but if we're really close to that, these deer all of a sudden get that feeling of, I'm not hunted here. I'm void of human presence. They revert back the way the good Lord intended, and they tend to walk around during daylight. If you think about it, the only reason they get more nocturnal is the human presence. Everything else hunts them at night too.
Yeah.
So, it's just human presence. The more we can pull that human presence off of them, the more they'll revert back to that walking around daylight. I'm quite certain you've watched the jury videos and the Kiskies and so on and so forth. You're like, my God, those deer walk around during
daylight. They do what deer are supposed to do.
This isn't reality. Well, they get a large amount of ground. They remove all of the perceived hunting pressure off of it. And all of a sudden, bam, they start walking around during daylight hours again. And that's what we want on our farm, essentially.
I think
it's all possible.
Yeah. I think it's like, it's hard for people to accept, and not that we would advocate that people don't, use or go on their farms. It's like land is meant for enjoyment, but the reality is, like, man, you can have a big impact really quickly, especially on a small piece with just, a little bit of stuff there. You really have to be aware of like what is happening just organically. I think that's a really cool aspect of, I'm sure you encounter in like with consulting, is just like, hey, what goes on here normally? Like, is there normally farming activity? Are they normally running cows back and forth in this pasture? Is there normally a truck that parks at this neighbor's house down here? And to be able to use those, is there normally a train that goes on this thing here? All these little things that you can we can use that. I can use that to access the farm here and take advantage of.
100%, very intelligent, comment, because you're right. If a train goes down that track 12 times a day, it does it every day of his life.
That's right.
It's done it before he was ever there. It's done it after he's gone, and typically within a few minutes of it each time, every day.
Yeah.
That's something that happens every single day. Even if it's a farmer that is simply riding the 4-wheeler along his fence to make certain that his cows stay in, and he does it every day.
Yep.
As long as that deer's been alive, if that guy's been doing that, that is nothing out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
And you can utilize that as hey, grab the wife, have her take you on the 4-wheeler, and you slide in there just right along the way the same farmer does all the time, just drop you off the stand, and you just hop up in the stand and keep on going.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's nothing changed in their perception of the world. That is a common occurrence that has happened every day of their life.
Yeah.
And you're good.
It's also the beauty of like, I use the word like dead space, or like if somebody, looks at a piece of property as like a canvas, it's like I'm sure there's a term in the art world of like, how do you use, the white or, what at the background there. The beauty of dead space is like, you may look at it as like, well, there should be habitat here, but if there was, okay, that now your access is pushed back, so we default.
And I do that a lot on the consults. I'm like, listen, if we want a log or TSI or something, this part of the farm, because we want to access this in your, what you was calling dead space.
Yeah.
And if we can make this spot over here the more desirable bedding, we can maybe suck them in over there and then use this because cover and sanctuary are two different things, right?
Sure.
And the older I get, and I'm not trying to make this sound bad, but the older I get, the less I like crowds of people, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
I don't go out to the bar. I don't go out to whatever.
Just people in general.
Yeah. We're with you, man. Don't worry.
I mean, my point with that is the deer is much the same way. They're very content if they can get into their own, area. And when one of you or both of you were talking about this earlier before you brought me on about the browse and all of that stuff. He's talking about your deer getting on the clover and so on and so forth. 100% that woody browse and stuff. If you think about it, a mature buck outside the rut spends 99% of his daylight bedded in his bed.
Yep.
But I mean, he has to eat too. So he stands up, stretches his legs, goes to the bathroom, eats around on that woody browse that's in his bedding area, and then lays back down. And he might do that 8 or 9 or 10 times in the course of the day, all right there in that bedding area. So therefore, he wants to have that woody browse and stuff in his bedding areas so he can do that. You know, whether it be acorns or fall mushrooms or, as food sources change, or whatnot, he's got several bedding areas and so on and so forth. And but it, typically speaking, if it looks like an F5 tornado went through it, it's probably holding a big deer.
Yeah. Well, Mark, we talk about that a lot, especially as whether, it's a lease or in a lot of cases it's own ground. And it's like, okay, most of the time when you get these pieces of ground, like they're not turnkey, right? It's like, okay, we got to go to work. We've got to do TSI in these areas. We need, select clear cuts.
Just to get that across, I've never stepped foot on a turnkey piece of property. I'm not convinced that they exist. Like fully. Yeah, I mean, there might be just a dozen of them across the country, but
right. And so why I say that is because, even with some of my farms personally, I've got, let's say 3, 4, 5-year-old deer on there, and I will make changes, especially to the cover and stuff, and it still seems like they just are still bedding where they found security in the past. Like how hard is it, I guess, is the question of getting those deer that are already existing on your farm that are maybe in that 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old age class to adapt to the changes versus like some of these 1 and 2-year-old bucks that will be your future ones. Like this is what they're growing up with. Like this is kind of all they know, I guess.
Great question. Typically speaking, I don't try to move them from it, because here's the thing, there's a little box of prerequisites that a mature buck wants. They want sanctuary, they need cover, but they also need sanctuary, but then they want woody browse and all of the things that they want in that bedding area. They need water, obviously, they want food, they want those. There's all this little box that we put off in the corner here of what does he want, and then we try, depending on the size of the farm, let's say it's a 700-acre farm, I might try to make quadrants in that and split it up into almost, call it 4 different. Every farm's a little different, how it lays out. But I try to create its entire ecosystem of what he would want in each quadrant, so we can hold more mature deer in like our own different pockets of deer herds. And then you're going to get some cross-pollination. That buck's going to come from here to there to there. He might hit 3 of those areas. One of them might only hit 1 of them. Each deer has their own different characteristics. But to your question, typically in that quadrant, they like, especially late season, that south and east facing hills, where I find the bulk of my sheds, especially if I've got, quality food right there. But if you think about it, statistically speaking, if he's laying in his bed 14 hours a day, you got a better than 50-50 chance his shed is going to drop off his head.
Right there.
The odds are, just in a statistical manner, it makes sense that they're going to be there. Well, I try to take where they already want to be and then enhance that.
Got it.
And then use the dead space elsewhere to just, when I say I enhance that, I try to give them that woody browse, try to give them their grasses. Because then a lot of people don't understand too, like the grasses, whether it be warm season grasses right in there or just opening up the canopy and getting grass there. Have you ever went and laid down on like it's not a common thing, but as a kid, whatever, you go lay down on frozen bare dirt ground, it'll suck the body heat out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But if he's got grasses of some kind to lay on, those grasses are hollow. There's thermal properties in that. It's like busting a bale of straw for your cows or your dog or whatever that lives outside to lay on, because then their body heat can warm up that dead airspace, and you've got a thermal layer between you and that bare dirt. And for us, when it's cold and miserable, like right now, I think it was negative something this morning. You could, and we got a bunch of snow last night, so I could go up here on any one of these ridges on the southeast facing that's catching sunlight all the time out of that cold northwest wind, and I try to enhance that spot because it's already where they want to be. It's a matter of survival for them.
Yep.
And then we try to create, those grasses, promote grasses growth. So to really hit it hard to where a lot of that natural grasses and stuff grows. So they have that thermal layer to lay on
in the timber you're talking about too.
In the timber. Yeah. In that bedding area. And then if they were kind of hodgepodged around where they were bedding, in theory, we try to, because we made it so good, we want to suck them to that spot.
Mm-hmm.
And then, go ahead.
Are you promoting that with burning? Are you burning the leaf litter out of your timber?
Again, every one of them's a little bit different, but burning or hardcore TSI and I'm not big on the hinge cutting. I've seen, and I say that I would rather lay the tree right down. I don't like girdling because
no, me neither.
No control about where that tree lays.
Yep, agree.
Once it goes, and you have no control over some of the stuff there. So typically I'm like, listen, let's take the undesirable trees and we'll put them flat on the ground. I don't care if you hook onto them and pull them out and use them as firewood, or what, I don't care. Or if you want to leave them there. I do like some of the horizontal. I'm certain you guys have found sheds in the past laying right on those southeast facing slopes, right behind a laid down log or a tree or whatever.
Sure.
They're so intelligent. It's like they know when they're laying down that their profile is horizontal for the most part. And you can lay right behind it. And then again, those logs, sometimes I think they take in heat all day long with the sun.
So makes sense.
A little bit warmer later on in the evening. So I mean, it's just the long-winded answer to what you're saying is that I try to take where they already want to be, and then for the most part, which would be the most desirable for them, and then really enhance that spot, and then hope that I've sucked any of those stragglers into that spot to create dead space to slide up into our stand.
That makes sense.
It makes sense. You're not going to change the topography, which is really like the that's the foundation of like what you have to work with. So, I mean, the path of least resistance is just to maximize what you have. The other thing, on those, especially in the timber, and as we're saying this, and I've walked my farm recently shed hunting, and it's like you realize, you think you're doing a good job, and then you're like, boy, there's a lot of work that I could do here to make this better. I was even thinking, on your south and east facing knobs in the timber, where we're at, so in Ohio, Jeremy and I both have farms in Ohio. They're, they have sections of timber, and we just don't get the grasses in the timber like you guys do in the Midwest. We have a farm in Illinois too, not all that far from you, that gets a lot more of that, and it's great. They use it that way. Even if I burned the leaf litter out of our timber, which I plan on doing at some point, hack and squirt all your smaller stuff, TSI, all of it. What if you're going to double bar in some cedars here and there? The thing that seems like you could do that just, it probably is not that hard, but it just seems like, am I going to go to that level? Is taking some straw bales out there.
I was going to say,
straw bales out there and dropping them like right where you want. I guarantee they'll use
I've
those.
seen people, and again, I don't know the practicality in it, but I've seen people taking round bells out at this time of year and just opening them up and rolling them down a hill. Like just rolling them down the hill, and it just lays, a straw bale.
On like a bedding?
Yeah, on like a southeast facing type, not just rolls it down, and then it just creates this down. Now, at this point, it's more of like, hey, I'm just trying to ease the stress off these deer, right? They just had a hell of a rut. We're in the midst of winter, whether it's cold, you had snow, like there's minimal food, stress, like you've got all these things. So long term, I mean, we've talked about burning that off and potentially putting in, like seeding in a switch or a gamma grass stuff, just trying to seed something in there. Is it going to grow like we would want to see it in?
It will.
I don't know.
Here's one more. I know we're talking a lot here, Mark. There's $1 million idea that I'm like, from an energy translation standpoint, I don't know how this works. Somebody can make a lot of money off this idea. If you could put a heated bed out there, like if you could find an efficient thing to where it's like, okay, for a reasonable amount of money, I can go out and I can put, a 5 foot square, whatever it is for them to lay on. Especially if you incentivize them initially with a straw bale, it's where they want to be anyways. They will freaking use that.
Like a solar blanket?
Yeah. Like, imagine if there was a spot of dirt that never got colder than 55 degrees. They're going to freaking lay there. You know what I mean? You're gonna find so many sheds right in that pocket.
Yeah.
I would. Hey, here's the thing. I'm all about thinking outside the box, and if you think about it, and this is what I always tell everybody, if you create the master bedroom, I don't know if any of you got kids or whatever, but the analogy, and I use analogies all the time, and I apologize, but let's just say that you guys rent an Airbnb down in Florida on, whatever, Fort Lauderdale Beach.
Yep.
You go down there, you don't walk through the front door and say, hey, kids, right there's the master bedroom. You take that. Me and your mom will take this over here. The alpha male. You paid for this. You're taking the best spot in the whole area.
Yep.
And that's the point I try to tell everybody on their farm. If you create the master bedroom in your area, guess what you get? You get the alpha.
You get the alpha.
You are checking off every box. The first question I always tell every client is this: what makes our farm better than the neighbors?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that is the question. And it's really easy to get emotional about your own farm.
Sure.
It's your own farm. You got a lot of money spent, you got a lot of time, sweat equity, so on and so forth in that. And but in an unbiased arena, typically speaking, that answer is it's not. It could be as good as my neighbors, or I might be stronger than my neighbors in some areas and weaker in the other. And that's the parts that we need to identify. We need to identify, what is this farm's strengths? What is this farm's weaknesses? Let's improve these weaknesses so we can give them everything they want here on this farm, essentially making the master bedroom. Then even if you kill the alpha male, usually speaking, the beta, which is now the new alpha, will move into that spot.
Yeah.
Every time my wife and I head south, typically my son ends up taking our bedroom because the new alpha male's here and all of it. But my point is that happens in nature nonstop.
Yeah.
So if you can create that, even let's just say that you can't hunt this week or whatever, but if you've created the master bed, the best natural browse, everything, southeast face, everything he wants in this world, you've created there, and you've sucked him in there and he's bedding there. Would you rather have him, even when you can't hunt, laying on your farm protected, or do you want him on the neighbors? And then, once he stands up, if he has to leave you every day to go get nutrition, he's at risk.
Right.
So we want that food on us. And we try to, and I always tell everybody this, that I like taking the number of plates off the table, because another mistake I see a ton of clients do is they will put, sometimes they put 8, 9, 10 different little hidey-ho kill plots scattered throughout the farm. Well, if you think about it, let's say that this week you had to work and you only got to get out there one day that week. And let's say that on that day, in that afternoon, the deer you're after got up and was walking to one of the food plots you've designed, but by your own design, you have a 1/7 chance of actually seeing the deer that you're trying to kill, because you have gave him so many options to go to that you're playing Russian roulette every time you get in a tree stand.
Right.
But if you eliminate the number of plots, but try to increase the size, I'm not saying reduce the amount of nutrition you're giving them, just take the number of plates off the table and bring them to more, a couple of plots. So all of a sudden, with our cameras, we as well as observations and so on and so forth, we can kind of figure out with what wind, if I know where he's bedding, presumably, with this wind, if he's got a 1/4-2 wind, odds are he's coming to this plot, and then we've designed it accordingly.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we're way more effective. And I use everything. I use woven wire fence like it's going out of style. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread as far as the whitetail is concerned. Can they jump a woven wire fence? Absolutely. If you boxed a food plot in, they jump it everywhere that there's a trail that's going to the food. The moment you leave a gap where they don't have to jump, they will walk through that gap. I don't care. It'll move them 100 yards out of their way to walk right through that gap. I use it all the time, even when I'm designing a food plot. If you think about it, if they're, and typically I try to enhance the bedding and then eliminate their ability, and then add nutrition, and then eliminate their ability to get to that nutrition, but by pinches that I have a stand that I've got great ingress and egress out of. And all of a sudden things play out. And I typically try to bring them into green and then through that green into grain. Because again, to my point, I if at all possible, I'd like to have all of that there for him. So if he wants green today, like you guys are talking about your clover, I've got the green on that plot. And then if they want the grain, they essentially have to come through the green to get to the grain, because between the bedding and that grain, I've eliminated their ability to get there. Not eliminated it, just made it a little cumbersome. Just restricted it. And then take that pinch I've created and have my stand. But that stand and that plot, or that plot and that bedding, was designed for my stand to get in and out of unseen. You know, you ever heard the adage that the first time you hunt a stand is the best chance? Well, it truly is. They've never seen you going to and from it. They've never smelled you going to and from it. They've never seen you out of it. They never smelled you out of it. You truly have the element of surprise. But what if we can design our plot to where we don't cross a single trail going to our stand? We can get out of that stand hidden back out the back door. And we can leave that stand in the evening if the deer I'm after didn't show up, and there could be 50 deer on that field and not one of them ever knew we was there when we get out the back door. Essentially, the 10th time I've hunted, it's the same as the first time I've hunted it. And I've created that scenario. So yes, it eliminates the number of stands that you might have, but your effectiveness is crazy. I got a friend. I hope you don't. I got a client and friend, Southwest Iowa. I hope you don't get mad if I name drop him, but I'm pretty certain he wouldn't. But Brad Thomas, I did a consult for him a couple years ago, and I'm not saying that he was a naysayer on the fence, but he was like, why won't they jump it? And I'm like, well, yeah, no, I agree with you. They can. It's just when you give them an out to where they don't have to, they will manipulate their trail to come around the end of it. Sometimes it takes a month or two for them all to get to doing it. But once they've realized where the gap is, it's gangbusters, you know, because you could have a 5-acre field where you normally have 15 or 20 trails going into it, and they don't ever have to get within range. And just by your design, every one of them now coming from that bedding that comes into here comes within 25 yards of you. Think about how much more effective we are. And we can get out the back door, and you can put a camera on the end of that, and pretty much know every deer that's coming in and out of that plot.
Yeah, it's just like an extension of, you know, natural terrain features. I mean, that's what we all grew up like looking for and understanding how to read. I heard through the grapevine that you're a fan of like hunting at the heads of ditches. Like that's a big style of yours. You know, it's the same thing. You know, like, there you go. There you go. So you're like, okay, so here's something that works. You know, it's like it's a naturally occurring terrain feature. Every deer, they have to. Like, there's just maybe they could go through this ditch, but like, look at it. It's a gorge. Who's going to do that? And at the head, you know, they're exposed. I mean, you have a natural pinch point there. If you can do that with things that are, you know, whatever man-made, whether dropping trees or putting a low fence or whatever, it's like, yeah, they're gonna do it.
Yeah, think outside the box. Here's the thing:
even just mowing trails too through, you know, give them a path of least resistance where they feel comfortable, and they'll do it.
Yeah, and you're correct. I am a huge fan of that. I mean, you know, the good Lord's laid out structure here for us to use on a lot of farms. You know, think about it. You know, let's say that that hillside's 200 yards, you know, from top to bottom, going down that thing, and there's a creek at the bottom or whatever. And then you got this ditch that cuts up the side of the hill and stops 30 yards from the top. Look, you could go there and just look. Every single trail
just bows right there,
switches and then wraps the top of that thing. So if I can come in from the top, just bounce in 5 yards, climb up my tree, blow my wind back out across that wide open, and hunt that thing, I am hunting the core of my farm without having to punch into the core of my farm. I'm hunting it as ghost-like as possible. You know, and then can you kill a deer on any one of those fingers out there? Sure you could. But why would I hunt one spoke of the wheel when I can hunt the hub and hunt every deer, no matter what trail he's on, he gets pinched inside bow range right here. You know, I use that. I mean, any natural setting I get, and if I have to make it, I will do that too. If a ridge top's 80 yards wide and we're doing a selective cut or something like that, you know, I'll tell them, you know, with Bobby and the Whitetail group, when they do the logging, like if they do logging or whatever, a client, you know, that's what I love about working with Bobby and his guys so much is that I can hand Alex his forester that's the head of his logging division. I can hand him the map, and then if I put a little line like to make a wing dam there because the ridge top's 80 yards wide, as their guys are cutting the logs, then they'll just take the skidder and just stack them in there and create a little wing dam. All of a sudden, the 80-yard wide ridge that he could get past you by, all of a sudden, is 25 or 30 yards wide right there.
Yep.
And everyone come around ahead of it. And bam, in real time, as the logging stuff was going on, we create a pinch that wasn't necessarily there before.
Yeah.
You know,
it's a beautiful thing, man. I think that, do you offer, you know, do you have a place where people come out and do like field to see farms that you've set up or anything like that? I know some other guys do.
You know, I haven't yet, but so it's funny you ask that question, and it's kind of coming on to a subject that you talked about earlier. You're like, where one of you said something about I don't know if there's such thing as a turnkey farm.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I started sometimes on these consults. You get on there and you're like, man alive, this farm has a world of potential.
Yeah.
You know, and I always tell them, listen, if you guys are looking to sell a farm, if you ever think you're going to sell, please call me first.
Yeah.
Because I would love to buy it. So me and a buddy started doing that here a couple of years ago. And as we got calls, you know, if it was a farm we wanted to grab, we grabbed it. And then so I sold my first turnkey farm this last fall.
Yeah.
The first deer I shot this year was on that farm, was 171-inch 18-pointer or whatever.
Jeez.
So we put the farm up for sale. Well, we had the realtor come on the 29th and look at it. And then he sent a little email out to a couple of his, you know, buyers that have got a hold of him that's looking for farm. The guy shows up the next day, walks it with the realtor, makes almost a full price offer with a contingent of, hey, you guys no longer hunt this farm as of when I signed this purchase agreement and put down earnest money.
Yeah.
And there was a bonus to do that.
Yeah.
So we did, and he shot 2 Boone and Crockett deer off of that farm.
Wow.
in like the next couple of weeks. Then called me up and said, hey, I've bought 2 other farms, and if you can do on those farms what you did right here, do it. I don't care. I want it done. You know, he's like, this farm is the most badass piece of machinery I've ever been on. And the deal is that farm, like all of the switchgrass in place, all of the food plots, you know, water tanks, anything that I thought needed to be done on that farm was done. And then all of the stands were in place. Everything stayed, you know, like it truly is a turnkey. The plan is given to you, everything for every wind lays out on every stand. Like you get everything, you know, these are the stand. This is the wind you hunt the stand with. This is the blind. This is the wind you hunt it with, morning, evening, whatever. It's all completely done. And we started, that's kind of what we've been doing. We've been buying farms and kind of flipping them. And we create a little website for it or whatever. It's huntingmegabucks.com. And we just, you know, if somebody's looking for a turnkey farm, that's kind of what we're out doing.
Awesome. You know? Cool. We'll talk more specifics after the podcast. We have a lot of mutual connections. We're in some same area too. But
how many people in that situation, Mark, are looking for like the plan to then execute themselves versus like it sounds like that last guy's kind of like just get it done type of thing. Like when you go on some of these visits, are you seeing a lot of people who are like, I just need somebody to help me see the vision and then I want to do it?
It's a good mix of both,
okay,
to be quite honest with you, because there's a lot of guys that have been very successful in whatever it is they've done financially, but
everything except hunting.
They don't have a lot of time.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Farm, or they bought that farm and then they didn't get out of it what they thought they would. Like they thought they killed big deer. It's got big deer. Maybe they bought the farm because of a bunch of trail cam pictures that's on it, and then they not be able to kill it. And then you go do the plan, and they're like, well, do you got a guy that will plant the miscanthus or do the food plot work or do the TSI? And I do, are you guys familiar with Toby Stay? He works closely with his boy Tanner. Is kind of a little beast. I mean, I think he's only 19, but
wow. He's killed some big ass deer too here recently.
Yeah, guess what? He's had the right group of people around him for a while. He couldn't help but soak up information. And he's expect great things from that kid. Him and Jesse, honestly, is because they're both very motivated. And they just have got, just by whatever, whether it be by design or luck or whatever you want to call it, but it's got just the right group of people around them that they can't help but soak up the right information. And then apply it, at a very young age. So
that's awesome.
I would expect Tanner to, I'm going to specifically say Tanner. I'd expect that little shit to kill some. He's going to have a wall. I'm telling you. But Jesse will too. I mean, I guess I shouldn't.
Which one was it? Tanner or Jesse that killed that giant 10 this year?
That's Tanner.
Yeah, that was a freaking toad, dude. Like, enormous.
I think it was 185. And then the internet. The internet's, because of what I do. It was another part of information before I came on or whatever you guys got to talking about or whatever. But, because you're talking about how it's how do I say this? You got to be very cognizant of what you put out there.
Oh yeah.
The deer that you show and so on and so forth. But if you guys know me, I'm the one that listen, if I'm hunting something, I'm going to put it out there. And don't get me wrong, it creates a bunch of haters. It's crazy how many people, but it goes all the way back to 2013. I shot that buck Facebook. I named him Facebook's 186 and some change, typical 11 point. And it was the first time I'd ever brought the world along with me on that front. I was given day to day and sometimes multiple times a day updates of this deer, and then ultimately killed it. And that being said, it's what kind of started me doing what I do as far as on the Facebook side of things now, or social media side of things. If I got a big one I'm after, you know what? I'm going to put it out there. This is supposed to be fun.
Oh, it's man.
It's supposed to be enjoyable. I'm supposed to be able to enjoy it with my friends, and it's got to so cloak and dagger 007 anymore. I can't stand it. I want to be able to enjoy it and be able to put it out there. And here's the thing, like the television shows, there's a 30-minute television show that you get the highlight reel.
Right.
You're not getting the trials and tribulations, typically speaking, that's involved in that. We all don't just walk out there and just shoot a giant every time we go hunt. That's not how things work. Through that social media platform, listen, I'll make fun of myself. If I can't bag on myself, who can?
Well, I was gonna say, man, it was this past year that you were hunting that buck in Kansas, right? That
last year.
Last year was in Kansas. Yeah, and I mean, there were, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I remember following you, there were several, I wouldn't say you called your shot, but you were calling your shot and it didn't pan out. It didn't show. Shit happens. You know what I mean? But
100%.
But following that story the whole way through to the end was it was cool to see that, because I thought it brought Like literally you were describing your thought process every time you were about to go out and hunt that deer.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly what I'm talking about right there.
Yep.
Trying to make it a teaching moment as well.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing. If anybody's ever tried to hunt a specific deer, buddy, you better expect to get several days of humble pie fed right to the face.
Yeah.
You know, it's the way it is.
Yeah.
They're just smart. They're good at what they do, you know, and so on and so forth. And my point with that is I want to, if I can express that through the course of social media, being, hey, listen, I some of you might think I'm a really great deer hunter, and this deer right here is just treating me like his puppet, you know. and it's funny because when you think you got a plan, you think you got things set up, maybe he might show you that you're not as smart as he is. And it's fine. It's great as long as you keep that open mind and try to learn from that encounter.
I mean, that's what drives us though, dude. Those moments there, like those are the ones where it's like, okay, I see what you did there. Like, and it just, it keeps you on your toes. I mean, you'll kill bucks years from now because of things that happened from that deer.
100%. The lessons that you learn. And again, you know, lots of people get mad, you know, they get kind of bowled up. They get a deer inside the window or close or whatever. And they bull up and they're like, gosh dang it, always my luck and this and that and the other or whatnot. No, step back, think about it. The good Lord blessed you you had a situation there that you got to observe the target animal right there. Now go back and be like, okay, where did he come from? Where did he go? What was he doing? What can I learn from this to put that piece of that puzzle in here to where I close it? And I tell everybody this all the time. He has to be right every single day of season. I have to be right one time.
Yep.
And he rides him in the truck.
Yep.
All I got to be right is once.
Yeah.
So, you know, and back to my point with the fences and the making the bedding better and pointed and designing the food plot the way we did. That Brad this year, I did his farm 2 years ago. He shot both his target bucks last year in 2 hunts.
Jeez.
And then this year, his target buck, he had one target buck he's after he shot it. So in 2 seasons, he's hunted 3 times and killed his target buck every single time he went to hunt.
Wow.
Which is freaking awesome because he owns several businesses. He's working. He has minimal time, and it's just it's a way of laying out your farm when it's turnkey, so to speak. That makes you more efficient at hunting the way that you're able to when you have limited time. It kind of swings that pendulum a little bit more in your favor. Don't get me wrong; it don't always work out that way.
Okay, were you gonna?
No, I was just gonna say it's in the back of my mind. I was thinking about, and I shouldn't be, but like, you know, it's guaranteed people will comment on this channel, on this, you know, video. They always do. It's like people almost like scoff at the manipulation.
They do
thing. They're like, oh, I'd rather hunt them on like on their own terms type of a thing. I'm like,
yeah, but you hear that like, oh yeah, I wish I was farming for deer. Or, you know, it's just
for sure.
And I get the argument, but I'm just like, I don't know. I get so much satisfaction out of like being the fact that you can manipulate them. It's not like I'm putting a high fence around my whole farm here. I'm using like the natural, you know, everything that's there to try to like create opportunities so that I can repeat it time and time again, and not just kill them, but grow them. That's really the hard part. Killing them. Once you get to a certain point, you're like, hey, if it's there, I'm killing it. Like it's going to happen. I mean, there's quite a few guys and farms that have reached that point. Then the challenge becomes, you know, keeping them there and growing them there.
Yeah.
Especially if, you know, you talked about earlier about like, how do I get them to lay on my farm, you know, and not on the neighbors. It may not just be for like during the hunting season. It's like for the next 3 years, because I'm trying to kill them at 6 or 7. I mean, the neighbors are shooting them at 2, 3 or 4 or whatever it is.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and to that point, one of the main things I always talk about too, as far as to get them and keep them and grow them or whatnot. And a lot of people don't do it at all, but the harvest of does. And I'm certain you guys have probably covered this subject a bazillion times.
Nobody has a good answer.
but I will lay it out, take it for what it's worth. But let's be a little long-winded. I'm sorry.
Oh, let it roll, man. It's a big topic that I still don't know. I don't know if anybody feels confident in the answer they've given so far.
The template of conversation that we've come from is like there's answers all over the board. Some guys are like, yeah, you need to kill them. Some guys are like, definitely don't kill them. And then there's everybody in between. It's just like, hey,
Well, I'm going to try to lay this out for you, and I'm pretty confident in what I'm getting ready to say.
All right, perfect. That's good.
Let's go with that. So, because rarely, whenever you read studies, a lot of times studies are driven by, say, where the finances comes from,
Sure.
and so on and so forth. And rarely do lots of studies agree. But every study I've ever read agrees with this point. If you have a button buck on the hip of a doe and you don't shoot mom, that button buck, that doe, whoops up on that button
kicks her out.
That next year. It is dispersal, God's way of keeping from inbreeding,
correct,
whatever you want to call it. In the Midwest, they disperse 3 to 5 miles to never be seen on your farm again.
Correct.
If you harvest that doe that has that button buck on her hip, that buck is yours at almost 100%. It was like 96, 97% in every study I've ever read, that buck is yours to raise for the rest of its life. Now, this is where you kind of got to put them both together. So lots of people plant food plots for their own benefit. Again, it's just about thinking about themselves, meaning just a little hidey-ho food plot, not necessarily sustaining the deer herd. It's I want to kill them over the top of it. But the reality is, if you think about it, deer have it worse off, in my opinion, than they've had it since the ag age started. Equipment has got so big, so good. The farmers have got so efficient that most of the time they can come in there. If they get 3 weeks of good weather in the fall, there's not another field left.
No.
They wipe it out, thousands of acres. And then, because they're done so early, then if they want to chisel plow, field cultivate, whatever, they turn most of it under, and now there's bare dirt with very little waste grain left.
Yep.
And then there's not a farmer in this country that hasn't seen a good tree they'd love to rip out of the ground.
Oh, yeah.
So there's less numbers of acres of cover than there ever has been, and then the grain that was left, all your waste grain stuff is gone. Now, the reason I get off into that side of things is a doe gets bred in November, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do either of you guys got kids? And I apologize.
Yep. Yeah, I've got a 12 and a 9-year-old.
Okay. So the moment that your wife or whatever got pregnant, the very first thing they did is put your significant other.
She said, "Get off me."
on prenatal vitamins.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Because it is a medical fact that anything that mom is deficient during the gestation period, that fetus is passed to. She passed it to it with an X factor. And the lack of a better term, and I'm sorry about this, but it's what I use, is a crack baby.
Yeah. Mom that's great.
Through those stresses, all gestation period, there is no nutrition or medical attention that can be given to that baby afterward to bring it back to what God intended DNA wise for that baby.
Yep.
That being said, the doe's bred, let's just say in November. You got December, January, February, March, April, going into May is when they start dropping all of them. Well, that's spring greenup. So if you think about it, the entire winter, if we aren't providing them quality sustenance through the winter, that deer is surviving, not thriving. And
correct.
Essentially, it is almost guaranteed that she's been stressed multiple times through this gestation period, nutritional wise, as well as just, regular winter stresses, especially if your social numbers are high. That being said, when that doe drops that fawn can't possibly reach its genetic potential because, again, the analogy I used about the skyscraper earlier, a skyscraper is only as good as its base.
Right.
It's only its foundation. The foundation is done in the gestation period, and that's factual. That being said, If you don't, let's say that we're providing all this nutrition for them. So that mom has been able to stand up, walk out to corn, beans, clover, alfalfa, turnips, whatever we've got provided for them, and eat their belly full all winter long, all gestation period long. That young buck that's getting ready to be dropped, the good Lord's blessed, buddy, you can reach your genetic potential. You're dropped. So now that fawn is on her hip. Fast forward to the next fall, she gets bred again. And in the spring, she kicks its butt and sends it off to the neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
Dispersal. The recruitment is you get a bunch of crack babies.
Yeah.
That's what you're getting in return.
Yeah.
But if you provide food all winter, then and you're harvesting that fawn, that buck fawn that's on her hip, dispersal doesn't take place at almost 100%. So let's say you got a 100-acre farm. We start providing really good quality bedding that's got all of the browse and stuff that they need while they're in their bed. Then we provide all of the food, nutrition-wise, that they need.
Mm-hmm.
Then we harvest, let's say, 5 does on that farm, all with button buck fawns that fall. Now, through attrition, you're going to lose some, whether it be a fence, a buck fight, PhD, bad neighbor, whatever. But for the purpose of the point, let's say that doesn't take place. Blink your eyes, fast forward 5 years. On your farm, all or part of your farm is the core of 5 5.5s, 5 4.5s, 5 3.5s, 5 2.5s, and 5 1.5s that are never dispersing. You're on your farm, all or part of your farm for its life. They have never seen a winter stress outside conditions because you have provided quality nutrients for them all winter long since gestation. According to Lee, he says it's a 30-inch difference between born and 5.5. If you bought a farm and you walked on that farm and you jumped up a 5.5-year-old 150-inch 10-point, and that hasn't been going through that kind of a program. Had that program been in place, that's a 180-inch deer.
Wow.
And my point with that is it's your investment into your future. And I always tell people on those farms, if you got a food plot that, let's say, 9 does and fawns are coming out onto, that's a matriarchal group. That's great grandma, 3 great aunts, aunt, mom, cousins, whatever. Well, we don't know which one's producing because it's on the doe side, and the doe side actually throws more of the genetic onto your antler than the buck even does. But we don't know which doe is producing us our really big deer and which one has a 7-point genetic or whatever. So I always say diversify your portfolio. So if you got a good food plot system set up over here, and we've created this box and we've gave them everything, and we got this own deer herd on this side and we got it on this side, diversify your portfolio every year as far as the does that you're shooting with the button bucks, because this doe group might be producing 180-inch, 190-inch deer, and this one's 130 or 40-inch genetic. We don't know which it is. It's the doe,
Yeah.
So diversify that portfolio and then do it every single year, and fast forwarding 5 years from that year on, you've got age class deer every year bumping into that age class that could provide giant, And the funny part about that too is we oftentimes see them have their biggest rack at 8. Now, I'm not ever telling you don't shoot a deer till he's 8. I'm just saying if you get one there, more times than not. Do you remember the buck skyscraper that Mark Drury killed?
Yep.
Remember, he was 8.5 that year. Up until that year, he was just an 8-point the whole time.
Yeah.
Then at 8.5 threw 2 huge drop tines and a couple kickers and went to 193. There's a buck in the Southern Illinois that I'm very familiar with. That I got booked for the seminars at the Illinois Deer and Turkey Classic this year, and buddy of mine, he's going to bring all of the sheds and the deer and all that stuff because it's a point I'm going to talk about in that seminar. But so he was 182-inch 8-point at 17-inch G2s, 15-inch G3s, giant 8-point deer. At 6, he threw forks, some extra points, went to 205. At 7, it was kind of a drought year, little bit smaller frame, more points, and he was 202. And then at 8, he went to 238, and my buddy's son killed him at 238. My point with that is that we oftentimes see that there's a significant spike in antler size at that 7 or 8, but most of the time at 8.
Yeah.
And we was always asking, well, why do we think that is? What, what's happening there? And then and I think you'd have to convince me that I'm not right here, because we've thought about this a lot. We also see them at 7 and then 8 start walking during daylight hours a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
A lot more. That 4, 5, and 6, especially 5 and 6, they're pretty tough. And then going into 7, they start daylighting more, and then 8, they're walking around like a 3-year-old again. And we was like, why is that? Well, that 238 taught us a mountain of information, because that year, I think he was seen out of a stand 17 or 18 times out of a stand that year. Like there's this massive spike. He had gone 36 inches and a massive spike in the daylight movement. Well, we had watched a 140-inch 4-year-old basically walk him down. Like he had to go, the 140-inch 8-point stood that deer down, postured up, walked to him, and the 238 just walked away from the deer.
Mm-hmm.
From the 4-year-old. And you're like, well, what in the world? You thought that he'd have got his butt kicked. Well, if you think about it, that 4-year-old, if you guys watch UFC fighting, he is a prime fighter age. Yep. He's that 27 to 32-year-old man that can beat his body to death all day, night, rinse and repeat it the next day. He is a prize fighting animal. That 8-year-old's a 70-year-old man.
Yeah.
So I think, and what we think is happening, the reason you see him during daylight a lot more is that he isn't necessarily keeping a doe anymore if 4 and 5 and 6-year-olds come up on him. He, somewhere in his maturity wise, the year, whether it be 7 or 6 or 7, but whenever he hits that age that he decides, I'm not going to beat my body to death, and all of a sudden he comes through that winter a lot healthier.
Yep.
And bam, you get that spike in rack size.
Agree.
You'd have to prove me wrong that isn't the case.
Well, so Mark,
we've had that discussion on that exact point, and
people is it a decision though? I mean, between the two of you guys, are they making a cognitive decision about like, I'm not gonna breed as much, I'm not gonna try to breed as hard, I'm not gonna compete with the other bucks? What is it that
I think the decision is just like maturity. Like back in the day, if a guy made me mad, I might fly off the handle and we might be throwing hands. You know, pretty quick. But the older I get, the less I always tell my wife I'm a work in progress. As I get older, I'm a lot more willing to talk my way through things and think about it and try to be like, look through their side of view too, as well. I guess what I'm getting at is I think it's maturity. I think when they get to a point that they're like, listen, she wasn't even that good looking. I'll go
right.
I'll go intimidate that snot-nosed 2-year-old out of his doe, and I'll just, and then if a 4 or 5-year-old rolls up on him, he'd be like, well, she wasn't even good with me either. I'll just continue on. And I think that's why they start moving around during daylight hours a lot more during the rut that you see, because we see a significant spike.
Well, and it's also been shown, like on the biology side, it's a proven fact, like their testosterone starts to drop. Like those 4 and 5-year-old bucks are like, they are at peak testosterone. I mean, it is packed full. And then as they age, just like a human, would, is their testosterone starts to go down.
That's what I'm trying to tease out is like, are they choosing to breed less, or are we feeling it's more motivated by younger age class males just pushing them off and they're less willing to fight for it?
I think it could be, and it's a great question. I think it could be either side of it. I think and maybe some of both.
Or both, yeah.
Regardless,
we agree with you. I think it's that activity starts to fall off, and they keep the resource. They're not as stressed going into the winter, and that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it makes all the difference for them going into the next year.
You see that spike in antler size, I think, because they just come through that they don't have puncture wounds. They don't
Yeah.
have beat up, whatever. They maybe didn't, break a leg or a hoof or
Exactly.
I mean, you think about how violent those are. If you watch like two similarly aged class deer that are close to each other go at it. I mean, that might be a 30-minute fight to death.
Oh,
it's a war.
And I think they kill each other all the time. I think all the time.
And that death might not just be immediate.
Oh, no. I think it's long term.
Could be a festering wound that lasts out a month or whatnot, and then ends up.
We talk about the brain abscesses because of all that force on their skull plate, and something cracks, and then bacteria gets in and infected, gets in the brain cavity. That deer, I mean,
they get stabbed.
There's plenty of research that shows it's like upwards of like 10% of mature bucks are dying from a brain abscess because of that. To that point, I mean, 2, 4, or 2, 5, or 2, 6-year-old bucks go at it. The amount of force that is on that skull plate. I mean, you can pick any skull plate up and you feel the movement in it, right? So think of them head to head, just boom and twist and pressure, like.
And it's nonstop happening. They don't break all those tines off, on willow trees and there's some real force that took place to break that stuff.
Well, if you're seeing that stuff at 8, right, then you do the math. It's like. It's at 7 that they're starting to pull back, right? So essentially 6 is like the last year that, whether they're going full steam at it, they're very active. At 7, the pullback happens so that at 8 they can throw it.
Can they know that?
I think sometimes it's again off of the characteristics of a particular deer. I've got deer that absolutely hate trail cameras. If you get a picture of them, typically you don't get a picture of them again there, or they're shy from it, or whatever, and others just don't care. I think each deer has their own personality and their own characteristics, and depending on which one decides that they're changing when they decide, hey, I'm not necessarily going to go beat my body to death anymore. That might be a year earlier for a few deer, and I think that's why you start seeing a spike at 7 sometimes, and then the next one, so they did it at 6, and then the next one might not be till 7, and they do it at 8. But I've seen it so many times. I could just sit here and recite a massive number of deer that we've seen that big spike late, in their life.
And it's got to be if you look at the deer side of it, like, again, look at the testosterone at 3, 4, 5 up into 6, and then like it's just biological. It's like whatever. I don't know what it is at guys, whether it's 40, 45, 50. Like at some point, your testosterone levels fall. Like it's anatomy. It's biology.
It should be a fairly easy thing to test. In fact, I'd be surprised if they haven't, like probably in a high fence environment. I mean, you could just test, take a DNA test of fawns that are dropped and attribute them to, like, if it's in an enclosure, all the deer that are in there. They should be able to say, hey, whatever, this 4-year-old.
I think it's a different
this
environment.
Many times 5-year-old.
When you put them in a close proximity, I think it changes the entire dynamic, though. Like, because most of the time you'd have 7 to 10 does in a 2-acre pen with 2 bucks, and oftentimes those multiple does are coming in at the same time. Well, he's only breeding and tending one at a time, right? So that's where you get the multiple paternities, where it's like, hey, these 2 twins actually came from different bucks because he bred her once, then got distracted, another buck came in, bred her, and like now you've got 2 fawns from 2 different bucks.
The Hunter Podcast is brought to you by Lone Wolf Custom Gear.
Man, Jared, we are tree stand fanatics, and I think the one thing that we have learned over all these years is to kill big bucks, we got to be mobile. We've been hunting out of Lone Wolves for many years, the original Lone Wolf, and then obviously with the custom gear stuff, we're using the 0.5 and the 0.75. Yeah. And the one thing that we talked about is like, what if there were no cables? Here we are.
I really just don't know how you can beat it, frankly. But, a lot of that came, too, from a relationship that we've built with the DeQuistos. We've had both Cody and Andre on the podcast a few times. The passion for hunting, the outlook on the sport and stuff, I think is eye to eye with how we look at it. Everything that has gone into building this brand and to building these tree stands is something that we want to be a part of.
This is the 40th anniversary of these guys creating tree stands that have been critical to how we hunt whitetail deer today. If you look over the past, you'll see Andre's designs being implemented across so many stands over the years. Such a cool thing, but really has changed the way that we all hunt whitetail deer from above now.
Right now, you can use code HUNTR, HUNTR, to get 7% off anything on the entire website. Be the Lone Wolf. Let me go back to the doe thing really quickly, because I've never heard it explained that way. I think that's pretty interesting. In theory, it makes sense. There's some variables that that I think just are out of control, that I don't necessarily know how to, if one's like better than the other or whatever. But it's like, so what you're saying is, hey, shoot the doe off of the buck because he's not a crack baby. Basically, he came through a thing. He's got his highest potential, and the exterior farms, farms outside of ours, we don't know. We don't know what's going on there. So we're trying to prevent dispersal so that we can keep those. But there's like a genetic factor that we don't know. Like it's like we could be keeping a deer that is low genetic potential, even though he's not, he's got a high nutrition potential, in lieu of another higher genetic potential that might even be a crack baby or not. We don't know, from dispersing onto our farm, but potentially,
No, you're 100% on the money, and we don't know which one is producing the good. That's why I always say diversify the portfolio. Take a mom with a button buck or two off of several different matriarchal groups. So you're constantly, giving that diversity of genetics, onto the bucks that we keep. Yeah. But you're 100% correct. And I'm not saying that you won't recruit several other deer, depending on the size of your farm and all that stuff.
It's still going to happen.
If you in the past haven't been, providing quality nutrition. I mean, I'm certain you guys have started doing this, whether it be lease or something you guys bought. You get in on it, and it's not ever had standing food all year long.
Yep.
And then the first year you do it, you got mediocre winter results. And then the second year, you're like, whoa, where all these deer come from? Well, now all your neighbors' deer have figured out that, hey, this is the place where all the nutrition's left. So you start getting a 20 or 30% bump in your deer numbers come late season because you're starting to recruit a bunch of them off, and for like almost a winter yarding set up there on you. And again, this is that arena that Lee talks about a lot, that if I can bring them in onto me and then keep them to spring green up, I a lot of times retain those deer. Now when you start adding food, your carrying capacity spikes, because carrying capacity is simply the amount of food that the cover or that area can provide the deer, So if we start providing a whole bunch more food, our carrying capacity drastically spikes. So you will get that recruitment. And that's where, if you think about it, let's just say you're in an area of the world that you've got high deer numbers, and a lot of the lower browse in the area is ate up. And then you see, late season or through the winter where and I'm certain you guys come across this, where they're literally eating the bark off the trees and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, those deer are massively stressed.
Yep.
But again, the doe only, so let's say that you're at carrying capacity and that number is 100. Let's say your farm has 100 deer. Every year, they're running off those buck fawns, but they're not running off those doe fawns. So let's say you're 70-30, 70 non-antlered to 30 antlered, but you are at carrying capacity. Like, there's no real recruitment. They're not allowing recruitment to happen.
Just so I can stay with you, is dispersal happening at the same rate, do we think? So like for every buck that get kicked out, I guess you're getting to that maybe with the recruitment. Are we bringing in another?
That's exactly where I'm headed with this. If you're close to carrying capacity on that farm,
you won't recruit.
And it was 70-30.
Yep.
That next year, bucks are getting run off. All the buck fawns are getting run off by the does, but none of the doe fawns.
Right.
So let's say you run off X number of bucks, or they do. They retain the does. And if that number is 100, just for ease of math, whatever. But that is your carrying capacity. Your buck to doe ratio is gradually just going to get worse.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Not better, because the doe fawns are going nowhere.
Yeah.
So the bucks will then just kind of somewhat disperse out to where nutrition is.
Yep.
And the does aren't going anywhere. So it's really paramount that we are taking does off the farm. It can relieve social stresses. On top of that, if you're And I always tell them that people ask me all the time, when would you shoot the does? Well, I like shooting them early,
Sure.
over late, because if I have let's say I've got 10 acres of food on there, why would I let her eat the food all fall long and then shoot her after she has taken 3 months of food off the table of deer that will be living there all winter long?
I agree.
Might as well shoot them early. On top of that, if my buck to doe ratio is somewhat skewed and I take several mature does off the farm before the rut, now when the rut hits, there's more vying for does, there's more searching for does, there's more rubbing, there's more scraping, there's more reactions to call, all things good in the hunting, side of things. So I always say, shoot, let's figure out what, and every farm's different, on your numbers that can be held on the farm or whatever. If you're really low in your numbers, you might wait a few years and try to build up your herd with the food, and then start layering in a doe program. But in my opinion, the number one thing, and if you think about it, and maybe you guys will have some of them on here in the future, and they could maybe talk about this, but your Lees or your Drurys or the Lindsays or whatever, a lot of those are taking 60, 70, 80, 100 does a year off their farm.
Right.
And back in the day, a lot of times, and don't get me wrong, I'm a capitalist and I like what they was doing. It makes sense. They'd buy a farm, they'd build it up, and then sell it for a premium because of the platform that they got. And of course, why would you not do that? But back in the day, you also didn't see them killing 200-inch deer all the time.
Yeah.
Now, almost every one of those people are kind of sitting on the farms that they've built up for some years. Most of them are killing 200-inch deer nearly every year now.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, that is the nutrition that they add, the pressure they take off, and then the doe program that they're going, because they've been, they've been investing in their property for 6, 7, 8 years now.
Yeah.
So and that has seen, that farm is truly turnkey. It's built itself up to where now every year you got X number of deer that's rolling into that age class that could produce, mega size antlers, if you will.
I think that's a big one. We talked about it with Greg last podcast is, especially when you're buying a farm, like, again, most times you're not walking into a farm that's just got giants all over it, but it's the time it takes to truly develop that farm to be able to produce those big antlered mature deer. It takes time, right? It takes 5 years to grow a 5-year-old buck. It takes eight years to grow an 8-year-old buck. And I think that a lot of times, just because of what we probably see through content online and social media and stuff, it's like, well, I put a bunch of food on it, I did a bunch of work, and it's been 2 years, and I don't know, I've got some 4-year-olds, but I don't have any 5 or 6-year-olds. It's like, well, you've only owned the farm for 2 years.
Right. It has to season. The farm has to see. It's not a sprint; it's a marathon. I know that's a cliche statement made, but it truly is. It takes time to season out a farm properly whenever you're doing it, because in my opinion, if you're starting with a blank sheet of paper, if you will, it's 4 or 5 years for that to really start seeing its potential. True potential, seasoned out.
Right.
But that farm that we sold, it was turnkey or whatever. It was 2 years deep, but it had a really good base when we got on there.
Yeah.
Had several really nice deer on it. And then it took 2 years to get the grasses and the food plots and fence work and stands and blinds and everything set up to where it was ready to rock. But each farm will be different there. Because to your point earlier, you can't simply shoot what you don't have.
Yeah.
If you don't have a big deer, you can't shoot it. It's just,
That's right.
And that goes into, people ask me all the time, should I buy a really big farm and do that? Or should I
afford a really big farm?
And buy, 4 or 5,
small,
40 to 60 acre farms in the right place? And I've changed my way of thinking over the years to that. I typically say I wouldn't want a 4 or 5 or 600 acre farm. Don't get me wrong, I say that, but if you got spread out a little bit, EHD, say EHD. If EHD rolls through and whacks 45% of your deer, yet 70% of those was bucks. It tends to be, really swayed percentile wise on the buck side of things. That farm might have got wiped for 3 or 4 years, and if you got 2 or 3 or 4 farms scattered about over a 30-mile area or 40-mile area or whatever,
spread the risk.
Farm, but you've got a couple farms that did not get touched.
Yeah.
And I don't know that you guys want to go down that wormhole, but I am absolutely convinced that EHD is government made. So,
really?
I mean, go look. Have you ever noticed how EHD is super pocketed?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Very, very pocketed, whether it be a waterway or a particular pocket. And you're like, okay, so this part, 50% of this person's deer herd got whacked, and 3 miles away, nothing. And then you go to another spot and whatever.
Yep.
I mean, let's just say, and again, I'm trying not to sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist here, but have you noticed that EHD is starting to hit areas that's never hit before in its life?
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, your Michigan and Minnesota, Wisconsin areas and all that stuff got hammered this year.
Yeah.
And that have never seen it.
We had some here in Southwest Pennsylvania too this year. Like
oh yeah, not too far from here.
Yep.
Now, he was an insurance company, right? Paying billions of dollars a year out in deer damage.
Mm-hmm.
Would you go fund $10 or $15 million into a little research, see if you can't get a midge that goes out there and could kill at a effective rate that is 20 times that of any of your hunting seasons?
Right.
Oh yeah. I mean, we've had it does sound conspiracy like, but I mean, it's no secret that vehicle insurance companies don't like deer and ag.
Clarify first. Just initially you said government, but then we transitioned to insurance.
Right. Well, yeah. Okay. Touche. I in my mind, I'm more convinced that it's on the insurance side of things than government.
Okay, and maybe there's some correlation, but we're saying, so follow money, the incentive is insurance. So we've had this discussion before. The counter is like, well, why don't they just raise the premiums?
Well, they have. I mean, look at insurances. I mean, they've raised them to the moon anymore for a lot of people.
Right.
You go buy a brand new truck, and you might, you'll be paying a couple $3,000 a year for insurance
at least,
right?
Depending on your age and how many racks you got.
Well, I guess, and I'm just throwing that out there as like an alternative to like, hey, instead of let's eliminate the threat, the thing that's causing claims, we can just increase premiums, and maybe there's a breaking point of that.
Think about how many insurance companies have been lobbying to these government officials.
Oh, sure.
To up tags and up areas and open this and lengthen seasons, and that's happening every year in most every state that they got deer damage.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and again, I'm not saying it's happening, but I question
follow the money.
Oh yeah. I mean, the follow the money thing is big. I mean, it maybe not so in like a Pennsylvania where it probably is more deer vehicle collision, but like in Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, the Dakotas, we've been quote trying to follow the money around the ag side of things. I mean, no secret that most of the big ag and farm bureaus and stuff want all the deer dead. Like they don't want deer. They don't want deer damage. And so you start to look at that, and you start to look at places in Illinois and what seems like even places in Iowa now, Mark, where people are like, man, we've gotten whacked with EHD, but we also haven't been able to recover from it. Like the herd isn't bouncing back, which makes no sense, right? If I take the herd down and I have all these resources, there should be more resources available per individual. Like there's
something going on with reproductive rates, and whether it's chemicals and ag stuff, yeah.
And the reason I got kind of so conspiracy theorist the way I am on the EHD side of things with the insurance companies or whatever right now is like this year, the general rule of thought was, okay, when you have drought time periods is when you really see that really spike. Mm-hmm. But this year we did not have that.
Right.
There's areas that didn't exist. We had pretty timely rains the entire time, and yet had this year one of the worst EHD breakouts we've ever had. We had it last year as well, and then the old conventional thought was, okay, well, if we get EHD this year, a lot of your surviving deer, have a bit of an immunity to that or whatever. Well, there's multiple different strains of EHD. I think 7.
Yeah, and those Midwest and northern deer don't have any resistance to that.
It seems like it's lasting longer too. Like I feel like I've never heard deer dying like in November of EHD, but it seems like that's happening now.
So anytime I find a dead deer now, I'm always looking at their hooves. I mean, they if they survived it, a lot of times they'll have a foundered horse looking hoof, so on and so forth. I've seen that a bunch. It's almost like just lack of a better term, looks like a foundered horse.
Yeah.
But we've just seen it so much more. And then the old conventional thought on the drought stuff was non-existent in a bunch of stuff, and yet it still was one of its most prevalent years that EHD's ever hit, and they're more of a wide range than anywhere else.
I do think that like this year, the last couple years, I think that the mild winters have not helped. Like I think this year a lot of the U.S. has had a much colder winter, snowier winter, and I think those midges sit dormant in the mud flats basically. And so if you never get that deep freeze through that mud into the soil and stuff, I think they survive. And so next year, regardless of drought, they hatch, they explode, they're there, right? I think, and again, knock on wood, we'll see, you have a cold winter like we kind of have had in a lot of places. I think that probably freezes down, kills those midges. And my guess would be that a lot of the places, even down into like Kentucky and stuff that were super cold this year, probably won't have any EHD or very low next year.
I would love to circle back with you guys a year from now.
It'd be interesting to see, right?
Because I'll get that. I mean, your theory has solid basis. I
don't
agree
know.
With you. I mean, it makes sense to me that exactly what you said. It's just that all of these new places that's never seen it, so on and so forth, and then they just get hammered. And every one of those places had a fairly significant, deer number population.
Oh, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. Here's the one thing that I don't think anybody has a really good grasp on is the introduction to the Midwest and the Northeast, because historically, like I worked in Mississippi for 4 years. I was a Pennsylvania guy, moved down to Mississippi. The first year we were there, I was exposed to this EHD blue tongue stuff with all these Mississippi deer. We had deer die, but we also, a lot of those deer just got sick and survived, right? Because it's, once I'm there, they're like, hey, it's an every year thing, right? It just happens. Like it's always been here. Well, at that time, that was 07, 08. The Midwest and the Northeast had never seen it before, right? I think it was 2012 was the year I was in Missouri at that time, smoked them. Like smoked
the entire southern tier of Iowa as well.
Like just toast. And it's like, okay, how, right? Like, are we going to play the global warming game? That's stupid. We've talked about the cattle transportation. Maybe, I don't know. Like, but somehow these midges that historically had only been in the deep South, all of a sudden in 2012 reared their head in the Midwest and Northeast. I don't know. I don't have an answer.
My point.
Right? I don't have an answer for it, but like that is the line that happened. It absolutely happened right then.
Yeah, let's just say you was an insurance company and you had an ability of harnessing that. And even if you had to put a substantial investment in it, and then you somehow, some way started letting that go, throughout areas that you're paying out massive amounts of money in deer damage every year.
Yeah.
Whether that be crop insurance, whether that be deer vehicle damages, so on and so forth, because that's in the billions.
Yeah.
If I'm an insurance company, and again, I'm not saying that I hate to get too specific, but
there's definitely motive. It's just, and we're totally open to that.
When Elon's done with the Treasury, we're going to put him on this one, right?
Absolutely. I like it. I would love to find out.
If they did, the payments, the orchestration is somewhere. Somebody knows it. Somebody has it. It's documented somewhere, right? If that happened. And again, it could have been, not to pick on the accent. There's no doubt whether it's herbicides, pesticides, insecticides. One of those things is affecting fertility of deer, and I think also turkeys.
I was getting ready to say that. I think I've been saying that for a couple of years now, that the turkey population. Look at Kansas.
Torched.
Kansas had some of the most fun hunting ever.
Yeah.
Turkeys. I was in the tree stand one year, and I kid you not, I watched an absolute parade of probably north of 1,000 turkeys walk past me we filmed it. It was me and Bogart was in a tree stand, and it was just it got so loud you couldn't hear you. You would have sworn you just got dropped in a flock of 5,000 snow geese. Like, it was so loud. It was an evening hunt, and they got past us a couple hundred yards, started getting into the trees.
Cackling up into the trees, yeah.
It was a parade for like 45 minutes nonstop, just nonstop turkeys. It was the craziest thing. And I was like, my God, look at and now, that farm, I still would have permission to go turkey hunt on it, and there's not a turkey to be found. It's almost like it's an anomaly to see one.
Yeah.
And it isn't because they were killed out by humans.
No, it wasn't. And it wasn't because predators ate all the nests. Like, that's been thrown out there. It's something like, again, when these things happen, naturally there's more resources to the ones left behind. And typically the reproduction rates go up. The populations, that's why they can bounce back, right? Both of these populations, they're not bouncing back.
Right. No, and that's Iowa as well. Like our turkey population right here, I live in a log cabin in the middle of the woods on the, Mississippi River bluff. And when I bought this house, you could step out that porch any spring morning you want to, and crow call, and you'd hear 3 to 10 turkeys just light up around you. It's an event to hear one now.
Wow.
You just don't hear it. They're just very, very few compared to what there was.
So, I think that's a prime example, though I don't think anybody's really picked it out yet, but that's a prime example of, like, clearly they're, and maybe it's not purposeful, right? Like, hey, we're going to knock but it's a friendly indirect benefit for the ones trying to reduce crop damage and destruction, essentially. So if I look at that then from an insurance standpoint, again, they don't want deer, right? That's extremely costly on them. Like, how many times are you going to continue to try to go back to the well from a lobbyist side and say, hey, you guys need to kill more deer? Well, guess what? Like, the hunters are killing them. Illinois, for example, we looked, it's like for the last 20 years, they've killed like 155 to 170,000 deer every year. There is no change for 20 years. Like, that is the variance. So,
well, it's interesting too. Like, in some areas, like there seem to be increasing. You know what I mean? Like, where we're in Ohio, I'm like, it's like hunters and the ag community are complaining about too many deer. And it's like, so I don't know. Like, in some areas,
but you don't really have like I would assume if I looked at a map, deer vehicle collisions are not that prominent where you're at.
I don't know.
Because it's just rural roads, rural country. You know what I mean? Like, there's no real highways right there.
We have quite a bit. Well, where I'm at, there's quite a bit.
Yeah.
I'd never hit a deer in my life until I moved up here. I've hit 3.
Yeah.
And I live, we're 5 miles outside of town, whatever. And in that 5 mile little stretch, especially fall, there will probably be 20-ish deer you see get hit every year.
Yeah.
On that road. I mean, and if every one of those results in an insurance claim, and every one of them are several $1,000s, or whatever.
Oh, it's just hard. It's just
hard to follow is all I'm saying. Like, there are areas where for sure it seems like there's something up. Like where where I've hunted for a few years in like North Dakota. It's like at one time it was just like there was 150 in every little block of timber that you went into, and now we can hunt there for a week and not find a track off one. And it's you have all those other factors. You have overharvest, you have poaching, you have VHD. You run down the list of their things, but it's just like, okay, I can't figure out why they're not bouncing back. But then in some other areas, I'm like, there seems to be no issue, and so I'm like, I don't know.
the common denominator, because it's deer and turkey, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you're dead on the point. It's probably in insecticide, herbicide.
It does seem to be, Mark. It does seem to be more in the ag focused areas. Like the more ag there is, the less ability to rebound.
We had a guy that I've worked with in the past. He's now part of the Mississippi State Deer Lab. He was the only one I've ever seen do research on, I want to say it was an insecticide, but he was actually, they were injecting fawns in a test study, and it changed the reproductive organs of the fawn, which clearly would affect then their ability to produce. And then when they checked it against the wild deer, and I think it was in North Dakota, the levels were like 3 times higher in wild deer. And they were like, they were literally injecting these ones that they were using as like the control base. And somehow it's 3 times greater, like what they're finding in a actual like substance in these wild deer. So clearly like they're having reproduction or, organ changes, which is going to affect it. So like, there it is, it's there. But think of,
they claim even in our area of the world, say 60% of their diet is natural browse, but that means 40% of it is ag related.
Absolutely.
And if they're eating an ag, that's been sprayed.
Yeah, it absolutely has. And so like clearly that we're at that level. And I mean, you're talking about like a multi-billions machine that you're going, And so I always said it's the same thing with like whether you talk about CWD or whatever, until it trickles to the human level, which, whether it's an RFK Jr. or whoever, like we're at that point where they're like, hey, listen, this shit that they're spraying on this stuff that we're all eating, it ain't good for us, right? It's not good. And so until that level happens, I don't think anything that you say on the other side from a wildlife or deer or turkey, whatever, is going to change, right? Like they don't give a shit.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that, I mean, on the political side, I think you're going to see a lot of things come out here real quick. It appears that the regime that is in currently is hell bent on transparency, which is awesome, is what we should have.
Yeah.
But I think that's why they tried to kill him. I think that's why there's so many people with their hand and at this point, I think you can almost just pick them out. Even that's like Mitch McConnell. You look at Mitch McConnell, he's supposedly got an R beside him, and he's bucking the system every chance he gets. But I think it's because he's been trying to help stop them delving into it, because he's probably worth $200 million on
a $180,000 salary.
And they're going to start diving into, where did you get this?
Yeah.
And I think his hand's in the cookie jar, and I think that's why you see it. And I could be right.
It's going to get ugly. But the hope there is like, again, from our level, right? We're the three of us are thinking about deer and habitat and stuff like that. A 365 like doesn't leave the brain. Yeah. There are people that I would say aren't as vested who are also seeing what we just talked about. It's bad at that point. Right. So if they're, the turkey discussion in the Midwest has been happening for years now of these populations being decimated. Now, all of a sudden, Skip Sly and Duncan and these guys are saying, going up to the late season doe hunting in Iowa, they're like, guys, do not kill does. Like there are none. There are like, I know that you're able to do it. You have tags for it. Like the deer population is struggle busing at this point.
And that's another part. It's all about educating, because if you think about it, just like your point, we think about this 365 days a year. It just consumes us.
Yeah.
It's not what we like to do. It's who we are.
It's
practically part of my DNA.
Yep.
But there's lots of deer hunters that don't think about deer hunting except for about 2 days before shotgun season.
Agree.
Load up with beer and orange vests and oil for their shotgun and 35 shotgun shells, and they plan on going and doing deer drives and stuff. And unfortunately, they don't give a shit. So they just they're a lot of times, and I've talked to a lot of these people. I'm like, listen, EHD wiped us out. Maybe you should buy those tags, make those tags not available because there's a certain number of them, and then throw them in the trash.
And they can't even fathom that.
We are in control of that management, but they won't do that. They don't. They don't see it. They don't care. They want, this is a pastime that they've been doing for 45 years, and they've been doing deer drives, and to each their own. I'm not, whatever, but they don't think about deer hunting like we think about it. They don't think about the future of the herd and all of those things that we stress ourselves out about. Most of the people that buy tags,
they would be shocked if they woke up one year or season or whatever and they were like, hey, there aren't enough deer to hunt, but they'd immediately find something else to do, right? We wake up to that and we're like,
who am I?
My life's over. What do I do? Right. And so it's, and unfortunately, like that's why there has to be, we always say it's grownups in the room, but there has to be grownups in the room that say, hey, listen, just because the DNR is telling you can go out and kill 10 does doesn't mean you should be going out and killing 10 does on this property. Right.
Yeah, right. I mean, and that lands right into that legal versus ethical.
Exactly.
Just because it's legal doesn't mean you should probably do it, because it's not necessary. Can I hunt 5 yards from that fence?
Mm-hmm.
Well, sure I can, but is it ethical? The guy's got to stand 50 yards away. Do I want to set up here? I mean, I'm not being neighborly. I'm not being ethical.
Yep.
I'm not, so 100% of what you're saying, just because it's legal doesn't mean that maybe we should be doing it.
But the hardest thing for any human, not just in hunting, is self-regulation. It's the hardest thing. It's why people get obese. No offense. Like that, just they eat too much. Like you can't self-regulate. Like it is the hardest thing to do, is to self-regulate yourself. And so if the bounds are there, it's human nature to push to the bounds. Like that's just how it is.
Yeah, and that's a good point.
So and I think that's where we've got great relationships with a lot of state agencies, but we've also had a lot of deep discussions around it. Is like, listen, your mindset is opportunity yields opportunity, right? I'm going to give them more time to hunt. I'm going to give them more tags to use, but that isn't necessarily what is good for the long haul to the deer herd and to the hunting opportunities in the future. And so unless you regulate, if you are literally saying, hey, we're just applying this at a landscape level and at the local level, like you're just going to have to figure out if you need to self-regulate or not, that's a failure. It's an absolute failure.
Well, like different states DNR, the way they run, the way their deer tags are done and so on and so forth. I mean, the reason I live in Iowa is because the Iowa DNR, the way they run their tag system and all of that stuff, I think should almost be copied and pasted across the country, because
Agreed.
They just do it right.
It works.
In my opinion, yeah. And there's lots of people that are non-residents that get upset. I can't buy a tag. I can't get a tag. Well, true. But when you do, you typically have an opportunity of hunting an area of cover that has more big deer per covered acre than most any other state, because of the way that the DNR plays out their tagging system and monitors and so on and so forth. I come from Illinois. I was born and raised South Central Illinois. And don't get me wrong, at one point in time, arguably the best state in the country.
Agree.
Kill a big deer. But I moved in 2012, but in that time, the prior 2 or 3 years, you just seen the writing on the wall. They went from, 5,000 non-resident tags to like 10 or 15 and then to 25. And then it got to the point of where, I could buy them over the counter as a non-resident, like, I could as a resident, so to speak. But in Iowa, they just limit the number of buck tags. And don't get me wrong, that does get frustrating for non-residents. I completely understand.
Yeah. Well, that's a long-term thing too. I mean, dude, it's not even close to a coincidence that I was one of the best states for trophy animals in the lower 48, and you guys are one of the only states that don't have crossbows in your archery season. It's not close to a coincidence. It's not at all. If that was the case, you guys would have nowhere to hunt, just like every other state. And over time, demand grows for like the last remaining resource. And so like it's not Iowa's fault that it takes 6 years to draw. They're just fending off all the other states who are mismanaging their resource and their hunting population.
And I mean, to go into the Iowa side of things, there's little crack that we could go down that a lot of people don't know about right now. A few years ago, they brought up legislation where they're trying to get non-residents to get tags.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm sure that's every year.
Yeah. And that and it got shot down in the subcommittee pretty quick. But the argument, one of the main reasons that they lost that argument, or whatever you want to call it, is because there was the party hunting. As a non-resident landowner, you was guaranteed a doe tag every year, and then you could party hunt on that doe tag and kill a buck. So lots of non-residents would buy ground and end up party hunting and whatever when they didn't get a tag. Mm-hmm. That being said, last year they closed that loophole, and they stopped it where only non-residents can't party hunt.
Right.
And at the time, I was like, why is it? Why didn't they just get rid of party hunting? Mm-hmm. Why did they only get rid of non-resident party hunting? That didn't make sense to me. And then at the same time, they then put into play a landowner. So in the past, a landowner, if you got a landowner tag, you had to declare by which season that tag was given. So whether it be archery season, early muzzleloader, first shot, second shotgun, or late muzzleloader, you had to declare, and that's the only tag that you had as a landowner. Now that tag is good. At the same time they eliminated non-resident party hunting, they then ushered in a landowner tag is good for all seasons that it's in. So now as a resident or as a resident landowner, your tag, you buy that landowner tag, and you have to follow the laws at which the season is in. Obviously, if it's early muzzleloader, you need to be using early muzzleloader, whatever. But I'm saying that as long as you're using the tool at which the season is in, your tags is good from the start of the year to the end of the year. That being said, I'm like, well, that, at the time, I was like, well, that's awesome, but now this year, they reintroduced the non-resident landowner tag to give them a tag. And then that passed through the subcommittee with flying colors on January 24th.
Really?
So
wow.
That's going by this next fall. I had the aha moment. And again, maybe that's me starting to think like a conspiracy theorist, but I was like, okay, now getting rid of the non-resident party hunting makes sense, because essentially they went in and got rid of the argument against giving the non-resident landowners tags. And now that argument no longer exists. It passed through subcommittee fine. And I'm hearing that it's going to pass through this by next fall. You could be a non-resident. You can buy as long as you had 40 acres or more. And
you've got that tag that covers all seasons.
It covers all seasons.
That's crazy.
Yep. So this is the Mark Luster.
And there goes Iowa.
This is the Mark Luster prediction into the future. By this fall, non-residents will have tags. Non-resident landowners will have an all-season tag in Iowa.
You know how much land will blow up overnight?
Yeah.
Price-wise?
We could go down the next wormhole of, make it worse or better on the deer hunting in Iowa. Yeah. I could argue on both sides. I'm not 100% certain, because there are a bunch of guys, like I was talking about earlier, that they don't manage anything.
No, they're just out driving the shit out of it, shooting the first thing they see.
Yeah. We are in Iowa, and there are still thousands of people that whack the first basket rack that walk by and say, I'm a meat hunter.
Yeah.
Well, why didn't you shoot a doe? So all that, but to each their own, do whatever. But I'm simply stating that if that non-resident landowner situation does take place, I could see an influx of non-residents buying land in Iowa, probably drive prices up. But those land acres at which they buy, typically you're not going to go spend $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 million on a property and shoot basket racks.
No, they're going to manage the shit out of it.
Start managing. So those acres that right now are seeing deer drives and shooting everything might turn into 160 acres or 200 acres of managed ground that's producing more than the one buck that guy can kill.
Yeah.
Wow, you talk about black and white turning hunting into a rich man's sport. It's like that's a complete displacement of all of the residents of Iowa onto whatever's left, whatever permission they can or public land. As we see, that's what's in Kansas, right? That's what we see in Kansas on public land. Is it's all because they have the 80-acre rule. If you own 80 acres, they have the landowner. Non-resident landowner tag. Mm-hmm. That's what Iowa would do.
And it displaced all of those resident guys to where for years we were just on public hunting and it was fine. And then all of a sudden it's like, holy shit, like every parking lot's full and it's full of residents. It's because they got displaced. Everything was leased or bought that they used to hunt on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a multitude of waves or, whatever that people can get wrapped up in the wake of that situation. It's a lot of wormholes one could go down to whether that's a good or a bad thing if it happens, Yeah. But I think it's at this point, it's a foregone conclusion that this is going to happen.
Makes sense. I mean, when you talk about the methodical plays there to get to that result, especially blowing through the subcommittee, like you just said, like that's a clear speaker there.
When they did the non-resident only camp party hunt, I was like, my God, that is awful specific.
Yeah.
If you didn't like the party hunting, which I'm not a huge fan of, but if you didn't like the party hunting,
just get rid of it all.
Why didn't you get rid of it all?
Yeah.
You only got rid of it to the non-residents.
That was I
mean, my assumption on that is they're just closing. They felt like people were abusing it, and people certainly were.
Well, people are abusing it on as residents too. You could kill your buck. Let's say you shot your buck in early muzzleloader season
as a resident of Iowa.
Resident, so your gun tag is spent.
Yeah.
So then you get a doe tag. So you're walking with a doe tag and you're doing deer drives with 20 guys. You could kill 20 bucks that year. You kill as many bucks as then that guy just puts his tag on it. Bam, calls it in. It's legal. Take her home. It's in my opinion.
Well, but that is party hunting. That's not the.
No, that's party hunting.
That is party hunting. I mean, what they're closing off is the non-residents using that as their opportunity to be able to hunt at all.
The non-residents. Yep.
Yeah. And everybody kind of knew that was happening, and it was just.
Well, you heard people.
Guys got pinched on that too.
Oh yeah, a lot of them did.
Sure. I just to his point earlier. If there's a line in the sand, it's human nature. Go right up to the line in the sand.
Yeah, and just push it.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Better Backstrap.
Well, one thing that's undeniable, man, is you and I both like to eat. And so we're going to be partnering with the Better Backstrap this year to have the best seasonings possible for our meat this summer.
Yeah. Well, dude, when it comes to venison, it's like you've heard me talk about before. It's like, what does the preparation for all this look like and stuff? And it's like, I really want to make a point of eating more venison moving forward. And some of the Better Backstrap mixtures have made it super easy.
Yeah. And so we've got kind of 3 core mixtures. You've got your original Better Backstrap, which is for that grilling of your backstrap or tenderloins or anything like that. You've got your classic taco mix.
Always can't go wrong with tacos.
Can't go wrong with that. And then you've got your standard SPG in the orange can.
Well, SPG and down the hatch.
There you go. So right now, if you go to betterbackstrap.com, you can use the code HUNTR15, get 15% off any of your orders on the seasonings, and there'll probably be more coming out here throughout the year.
Get yourself a Better Backstrap. I mean, dude, the thing that's discouraging about just like deer management and hunter management too, which is probably a way bigger part of it. And I find that it's super interesting. Our conversation lands there a lot of times. It's just about how will politics around deer hunting or management of the resource affect what people will do with it. So we talk about crossbows in the archery season. We talk about baiting. We talk about, cell cameras, all this technology and how it gets used and stuff. It just seems like nobody is advocating for a better resource and a better hunting situation. Like it's from both sides.
It's the opportunity yields opportunity.
Hunters,
mindset.
if it's left to the majority, they will vote in things that like give what they feel gives them an advantage, but in reality gives everybody an advantage, which makes the resource and the experience worse. And then it goes away, and they're like, "Why? What happened?" That
to expound upon that, just on the consulting side of things, something I see all the time too. Like CRP programs. Mm-hmm. Most landowners, they have to deal. If their property is in a CRP program, excuse me, they some programs allow 10% of the CRP to go into food plot or whatever. depending on the area at which that person, I've seen this so much, it's not even funny, but depending on the area at which that person has their property and depending on who's in charge at the FSA office right there, it is either a very easy situation to go through, or they make it hard. A lot of times I see if there's a and forgive me if I'm stepping on somebody's toes, but a lot of times I see if it's a liberal woman, usually that's in charge of that situation, she don't like deer hunting, she don't like people, she makes it nearly impossible for that landowner to put food plots on their thing. They're like, nope, well, that's marked HEL, that's highly erodible or whatever. You can't plant a food plot on that, whatever. I'm going to limit you from this. Matter of fact, I'm getting ready to do a consult in Southern Illinois or whatever. And that kind of scenario is playing out with him right now. We've been trying to be in contact because I try to help the clients out all the way across the thing through the FSA people with everything to help put the program together. Yeah. And she is not a friend of a hunter. And she is, even though it's in a program right now, that his program's in a CP1, which he very well should be able to plant 10% up. She is telling him, you can't, it's legal to plant 10%, but I've got that part, that, you know how you got to break them up by fields?
Yeah.
You can't plant more than 5 acres on any given field.
Correct.
And no more than 10% of the total CRP acres. All that being said, she's basically saying, nope, because I have this marked as this, you can't plant anything in that, even though it's in a program that it can. Yeah. And then she's saying you can only do part of this one field, but that field is only like 1 acre in size. So even if you planted the whole field, he only has 1 acre in a program that he has, 100 acres of CRP. Wow. And in multiple different, and I've dealt with it across the states. And then you get the right guy that's in the area. He understands what it is. He's a hunter himself. He's like, listen, I don't really care if you fudge it over just a little bit or whatever to make it, as long as you're not harvesting it. It's a CRP. It's a conservation reserve program. If you're willing to plant food for the conservation, the ducks, the doves, the quail, the pheasants, the rabbits, the deer, the turkey, and that's all left for them. That's kind of what our program's about, Yeah. So we see it all the time, so far off the spectrum that people that are non-hunters that are in charge of things that don't like hunting, they make it nearly impossible for the person trying to make his farm better. They make it nearly impossible for him to do it.
Well, that's definitely happening. I think that like the gap that I'm talking about is like on one side you have hunters who, extreme generalization, but just like if you look at technology, or things that, come out that are advantageous, run down the list of things I mentioned earlier, whether it's baiting or cell cameras or it's crossbows in the archery season, whether it's certain firearms to be able to, be used. All of that, a lot of times the majority of hunters look at that as a positive thing. There's like, hey, that's more opportunity for me to go out and experience hunting. It's my land, it's my lease, it's my, whatever. I should have the right to do that. And I totally get that mindset of thinking. It's not conservationally minded, but I understand the thinking. And on the other side of it, you have people regulating the resource from a legal standpoint. These are the head of the DNR. These are your deer program leaders. We spoke to a lot of them, and the tone from them is keep as many people happy and revenue coming in for the length of my term. And we're good. And so generally they'll bow to that, right? They're like, okay, well, whether it's from lobbying or it's from the actual demand from hunters. And so we just see things getting more and more liberal. That's why you see, like I said, crossbows in all of these seasons. You don't see baiting not getting taken out of states where clearly the resource is being depleted because of it. The cell cameras, the drones, run down the list. So it's like you have so few people advocating for an improvement of the resource, which I think inherently is a desire for a better experience for all hunters. And so I think that's just such an important discussion to have. There's groups doing it. There's like Jeremy, help me name a few of them. You got the Iowa Bowhunters Association. You got
for the ones advocating.
Yeah,
Iowa Sportsman's Club,
Hunters Advocate of Ohio. You got a handful of these, groups that are advocating for it, but they're so disjointed and underfunded and.
Yeah.
So,
no, I know most of them. That's on the Iowa one. Our most of the guys started. I don't know if you're familiar with Chris Duncan.
Yeah, Duncan and Taylor and those guys. Yep, Skip.
Yeah, I mean, and they're very well-spoken guys on it. I mean, and it's great to have those people there for you. Kind of having your voice. But I'm just curious as to how deaf of ears that they fall on.
Mm-hmm. It takes money at the end of the day.
Fairly,
unfortunately, like it. Most of these like Hunters Advocate
look at some
of
of the
Ohio.
prime states that are so close. Like Sumner's is your Missouri guy. We talked to him, and he's basically like, I get it. He's like, we honor the gun hunters first. Like that's who hunts here, our resident gun hunter. So we give them what they want.
Group that I know of in Missouri lobbying for differences.
Ohio's the other one we talk about all the time. It's a baiting discussion. We talked to several of the state guys over there. They're afraid of losing hunters.
It's hunter number thing.
And
in order for Hunters Advocate of Ohio to even have a chance in the game, they have to pay a lobbyist.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean you got to compete. You got to compete.
At the end of the day, it comes down to dollars and cents.
It's dollars and cents. Follow the money.
That's it. That's all it is.
Yeah,
and there's good people like in the mix of it too, but I mean it is dollars and cents at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, per the stuff we're talking, I mean, if you you talk about lobbying for some of these things, and then look at the lobbyists in the ag and the insurance groups. Good luck.
Right.
We don't have a fraction of the funds.
Infinite pockets right there. Infinite pockets. Their pockets are so deep.
Yeah,
they can pay for just about anything. That's it.
They will squash you every possible which way. It is damn near impossible. And unfortunately, like in most cases, we haven't gone head to head with that. Like it's us fighting off, PETA and those guys when you're talking about things in like Colorado or in certain cases, it's just specific things with the DNR versus like what the public says. The moment we have to step up against these other guys.
And half the time they know or they suspect that you might win. You might be right, whatever, but they'll bury you in 5 years of litigation.
Yeah.
And there you are. So you better have the pockets and the patience to push through to the end, and most people don't. So
most don't. Yeah, I mean, if you look at like the things that like Iowa has Iowa's battled back against the crossbow thing. There's a crossbow lobbyist that is going against them, and the legislature and is sitting there saying, okay, we're listening to both sides, and they've been able to fend those kind of things off, right? When you get against ag and insurance and stuff, that's a whole different ball game.
Yeah. I would be scared to tell you how much dollars. Is there billions or more? There's just no way to beat that because it is a dollars and cents game.
Unless the insurance thing won't, but like on ag, unless there's a issue affecting us as people. If it's a consumption thing, like if it's like, hey, this stuff from Monsanto or whoever is not healthy for us, it's causing X things to happen. And guys like RFK Jr., whoever you want to put at that area, that's the only time that this case breaks open. Because
you got to have somebody high enough in the tier that's willing to bring up the point. Think about this. I hate to get political about everything, but just a few months ago, you would have never seen George Soros at a inauguration for Donald Trump.
No.
Or Zuckerberg
No.
sitting there. And all of those, and both of those and several more
were there.
Donated $1 million a piece to that inauguration party and all that stuff. And you're like, what in the world? But I mean, are they that fluid that they'll just bounce back and forth to who's in power at the time? Or did he have the behind the doors conversation that actually turned him away? And I think, the way Zuckerberg tries to make it sound, at least, is that kind of the White House had their thumb on him for a while,
through all the COVID stuff and all of that.
You can actually talk about it,
Yep.
So how much of that is going on, that filters down onto our deer hunting world as well.
A lot. Yeah. And then until something breaks at the higher level, we're just here treading and wearing foil hats, basically. Like that's just where we're at, right? But all of a sudden, something cracks at the top level. Like, obviously, it hasn't trickled down to the deer hunting, but I mean, look at some of the things that are happening in this, like, the Social Security fraud payments and all of these things that are now coming out, and it's like, holy shit! Like, maybe we weren't crazy. Like,
we were paying hundreds of millions of dollars to 150-year-olds.
So, yeah, I mean, but that's what it's going to take in order to break some of these things. And it sucks because it's like, man, we've got enough, battles to fight on the front. But, like, if all of a sudden there's this crossroads of several things happening and in the best states, the Illinois, the Iowa, the states that have the most fertile soil in the country, the herd cannot bounce back. That's not good. Like, that has to be resolved, or I mean, it's the end of deer. I mean, you said about growing up in Southern, there's people right now in like East Central Illinois who are like, it's desolate. Areas that we were killing booners and there were 100 deer in a soybean field. You drive around and there ain't a deer in the field.
I think that's same thing with northwestern Kansas. Now,
Yeah.
I think they claim that's CWD.
Mm-hmm.
Right now or whatever, but that's, I mean, I used to hunt in and around Smith Center, Kansas. That's where we hunted.
And it's a ghost town now.
Central, slightly west. And I've got buddies that lease ground, that own ground, that hunt up there still. And they're like, buddy, it's hard to even see a deer. And you pray that don't reverberate down to all of the whitetail situation. But, I mean, is it CWD?
That's the big thing. We've kind of talked about it here, and whether we figure out how to do something. Like, there are questions that are kind of, I would say, extremely important, burning questions. There's a great one. It's like the why. Why is that? And I don't know if anybody's really answered it. Like, sure, somebody will say CWD. Maybe somebody says this. Maybe somebody says that. It's like, no, what? Like, that seems like a pretty damn big deal. Like, how has nobody stopped and said, hey, we need to figure out like what is happening here and why it's happening. And I don't feel like anybody's doing it.
I agree with you. And that's the question why is a powerful question. And you can keep asking it and go down a many different wormholes, but my point with that is that for years, even if we say it's CWD, all the way back in the 60s, they knew about CWD and west of the Mississippi River type scenario was where it was more prevalent, so on and so forth. I think they claimed some of the first origins, or I think a Colorado.
It's in Colorado, yep.
Or whatever, but that's right next to Northwest.
It's a stone throw. Mm-hmm.
My point with that is, why did this supposedly not happen decades ago? Mm-hmm. Why is it just happening now? So when I ask it, is it CWD? My point with it is if it was prevalent there then, and that's the epicenter, why hasn't that reverberated out from there decades ago?
Yeah.
And then when they found it in southwest
Wisconsin,
mm-hmm. Then they went on a headhunt for every deer that walked the earth over there, and I mean, did they fix it? I don't think.
No.
I think they
20 years later, it's still there. It's still, and I mean, they're saying they just put a report out. We're going to talk to the guy actually next week or 2 weeks. They just put a report out that basically said like a deer, a healthy buck in that area of Wisconsin has a 69% chance of surviving from year to year. A buck with CWD in that same area has only a 17% chance of surviving from year to year. And again, they have all the data to support this, and it exists, but it's like, it's taken 20 years to get to that potential answer. And then it's like, is that true? What do we do? What's the, right? That
was a good question, because that's where I was in my head. I was like, okay, but if they have all the data to support it, follow the money. Who is sure. providing the funding for that data?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I don't know.
because are they trying to get that finding and that data so they can advocate opening up the season and free rifle shooting all of those deer, but so we don't have deer vehicle accident. You see where I'm going with that.
Well, and even in Northwest Kansas, let's say that it just takes CWD a long time. It's compounding factors. Like, I've done the research around it, but it takes that long to and it is having herd level number declines like we're seeing there.
Yeah.
Still, nobody has laid that out there. Like, nobody has said, yep, this is it. This is what we're seeing. This is it. And we couldn't have stopped it. Okay. But there are plenty of other people who are early in the game then. Wisconsin's 20 years in, but places in Ohio are 2 years in, places in Missouri are 10 years in. You're telling me that somebody can't sit there and look at that data and then say, hey guys, this is what we're seeing. We hit a point of no return. You need to understand that. There is no discussion like that happening.
Right. And the only thing I do know is that whether it gets passed or not too, or whether it's been shot down by now, I don't know. I'm certain you guys may. But Kansas has got legislation up. They're trying to get rid of the baiting.
Yep, yeah. I've seen that.
And their argument, their sightings are that CWD. Baiting causes close quarters, nose-to-nose contact, so on and so forth, which then promotes the CWD spread, whatnot. So they're trying to shoot it down.
Yeah.
And I know a bunch of the landowners are all fearful. They're like, it's going to tank our market. You go do that,
sure.
And then we can't do that. There's lots of areas, especially in Southwest Kansas,
it's desolate.
that there's very few acres that you could get a field in, for a food plot. A lot of them are kind of reduced to, any meaningful nutrition is via, supplemental feeding of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
Being said, I know there's a lot of people pretty fearful about that scenario going down, but on the other side of the coin, again, it's which side do you want to get on to argue that.
Mm-hmm.
If you continue it, if in fact that CWD keeps spreading, it's in a period of years, in theory, it wipes your deer herd out, and then that tank is still going to happen. Yeah. So,
it's even worse. I'd rather have them and not be able to kill them than just don't have them to kill them at all.
Correct. Or get out your bulldozer and make some flat ground and put a food plot.
Well, we talk about it all the time. It's like, hey, listen, we'll create the habitat. We want to get them to 6, 7, 8 years of age, and then we'll figure about how to kill them at that point. I can't get them to that age anyway, so it doesn't matter right now.
It's a juggling match for sure. It's and again, going back to you can't kill what you don't have.
Yep.
You don't have big deer, and it's pretty hard to kill one.
Mm-hmm. Well, dude, that was fun. It was a good conversation, man. Really good conversation.
Yeah, you guys posed some really good questions. You make a guy think, so I like that.
Well, we'll definitely have you back on, and we can dive into it here, maybe as we get closer to the fall and stuff. But I guess before we let you go, if people want to get in touch with you about, talking about maybe having you come out to the property, I'm sure this year, you're booking heavy, out in advance. But what's the best way for them to reach you right now?
My phone numbers, and I don't have any problem putting it out there. It's 217-320-1285 or Luster's Land Consulting.
Mm-hmm.
My email is lusterslandconsulting.com. Or if you guys have watched videos and all that stuff, I do all of the consulting through the Whitetail group as well.
Yep.
Bobby's a very good friend of mine. We've been friends for a couple of decades now, and he's got a really good program going there too. So
awesome.
I always tell people don't go to that website if you don't plan on spending several hours down a wormhole, because there's a lot of really good YouTube content on there of what we do, and it just kind of shows you some of the stuff that we're doing and manipulating. And like I said, I've had guys that are like, I don't really want to manipulate that much. Can you help me pick the right stands? Like I had a particular guy this year. He had me up there in late October. We walked over his farm, but he had a couple of really big deer on the farm. He actually had 3 big 170 plus type deer on the farm. We went there, we identified stand spots, all of that stuff. A couple days later, he shoots 107, one of the target deer on it. The neighbor shot one, and then his son shot the other one. And we didn't manipulate anything. We didn't plant a food plot. We didn't whatever. It's just picking out the right spots using, what nature provided, or whatever, as far as pinch points and stuff. But it's just looking through things in a different view. I see lots and lots of guys that they're close, like they got to stand and it's 20 yards or 30 yards off. And it's just by the way that they hunt it windwise that we were talking about earlier. And then their access to and from it. A lot of times they don't know that they're kind of ruining and their hunt on their way in to that stand, and just doing little, different nuances. But
clean it up.
There's a lot there, and I've had a lot of guys talk about the information. I pride myself in it's one thing to set up a farm. I don't want to call that the easy part, but I also want to teach people why we're doing what we're doing, so they can take all of this information, and apply it on a different farm and not necessarily need me. Now, don't get me wrong. I'd love to come help you out on any farm you get, but if I've done my job, you're killing the biggest deer of your life and you're understanding why you're doing it. It's one thing to have the information in your head. It's another thing to be able to apply that in a teaching way that they understand it. Because if you don't understand why that stands there and why we hunt the wind that we're hunting it on, and the reason we're using the access we are, and why we're so analytical about getting to and from our stands, then maybe that application isn't applied on that property as well, because you don't understand. And I try to make certain that everybody understands exactly why we're doing what we're doing. And that's kind of my proud moment, if you will, when I get those texts and guys have killed big deer and they're like, man alive, this worked really well. And they're doing it on a farm that maybe I haven't been there, and they use that tactic on that farm and kill.
That's cool.
Like a proud dad moment, so to speak,
where
they've applied that elsewhere and they've learned, so.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, we appreciate you coming on, man, and I'm sure the listeners do too. Like I said, we'll have to get you back on, but a lot of good stuff there for people to process, and look forward to continuing the conversation here down the road.
All right. Yes, sir.
See you, Mark.
Cool stuff. Mark sees a lot of properties, and so, you start diving into the brain of a guy who thinks about it all the time and sees stuff and practical application and feedback from those clients when you're having those successful hunts and stuff. I mean, that's what you want. That's the guys you want to talk to.
It's impossible not to learn, with that much experience. He's been doing it for a long time. And like you said, seen a lot of properties. I mean, I respect a lot of what he's saying there. And a lot, it's fun. It's really fun. Like the more guys like that we talk to, people who have been on a lot of properties, whether it's, a Higgins, a Sturgis, a Glessinger, a Drury. And I mean, like a Lacoste, we've talked to like all of them, a lot of them, maybe not, it'll never be all of them, but a lot of them at this point. And it's fun. It's really fun to pick up on the similarities and some of the differences, some stylistic, some like an actual belief in how things work. But, well,
there's a big difference between habitat consultants, hunting consultants, the guys that can do both. Like those are those are the big discussions. And even when I was doing it, like I didn't even like the hunting consultant thing wasn't really a thing. It was like, hey, I want to grow big bucks.
Yeah.
So you're the habitat.
Just biologically, what has this work?
But now, as it's progressed, it's like, great, I grew them. How do I kill them? And that's a whole different realm. And so, Mark's the guy who I think has seen enough of the habitat side of it, as well as been successful enough on the hunting side that he's bringing both of that to the table. And that's valuable.
Got a wall of giants. I don't know if you mentioned it there, but that that Zeus behind him, that was, I think, the number one typical bow buck maybe in Iowa in 2021. I think that was.
That sounds right. Yeah, that was
which is
a monster.
I mean, if you're on the podium in Iowa, it's a big deer.
Mega.
It was 209 typical is what he said.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Anyways, we appreciate everyone listening to episode 238 with Mark Luster, and we will catch y'all next week.
Later.
Take me